Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn as Luffy's brother and fell in love with Boa Hancock? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Storm of Dawn. The air on the jungle plateau was thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed ferns. It was a humid, living thing, clinging to the skin and making every breath feel heavy. A younger boy, all limbs and boundless energy, shot forward like a stretched rubber band, his fist aimed for the chin of a taller, leaner youth. "Gomu Gomu no, pistol!" Luffy yelled, his voice echoing with the confidence of someone who had never considered failure. His target, the middle brother, didn't move. Arashi, at 13 years old, was an island of calm in the hurricane of his siblings. His eyes, a deep and startling blue, tracked the incoming fist with an unnerving serenity. He waited. The fist was inches from his face, the rubbery skin snapping taut as it reached its maximum stretch. Only then did Arashi move. It wasn't a dodge or a block. He dipped his shoulder, his body flowing like water, and brought his open palm up not to strike, but to guide. His fingers brushed against Luffy's wrist, a touch as light as a breeze. The kinetic energy of the attack, meant to shatter bone, was smoothly redirected. Luffy's fist shot past Arashi's ear, pulling the rest of his body with it. The younger boy yelped, pinwheeling through the air before landing in a sprawling heap 10 feet away, tangled in his own limbs. "You're still broadcasting the punch before you even start stretching, Luffy," Arashi said, his voice even and patient. He hadn't even broken a sweat. "Your opponent will always know where it's going." Before Luffy could unscramble himself, a streak of fire cut through the clearing. "Don't lecture him, fight me." Portgas Ace, the eldest at 14, was a blur of motion and aggression. He'd learned to coat his pipe in a rudimentary form of hockey, making it sing through the air. He came at Arashi from the side. A sweeping blow aimed at his legs. Arashi met this with a different kind of energy. He stomped his foot, a sharp, cracking sound against the packed earth. A current of unseen force, a whisper of wind, erupted from the ground, just enough to alter the trajectory of Ace's pipe by a hair. It missed, skidding through the dirt where his ankles had been. Ace, overcommitted, stumbled forward. Arashi flowed into his brother's momentum. He spun, his leg hooking behind Ace's, and his hand pressed lightly on Ace's back. It was a perfect trip. Ace, for all his raw power and fiery spirit, went down with a surprised grunt, landing on his stomach with a soft oof. "And you, Ace," Arashi said, now standing over both his downed brothers, a faint smile touching his lips. "All power, no finesse. You rely on overwhelming your enemy, but what happens when you face someone you can't overwhelm?" Luffy bounced back to his feet, undeterred. "Okay. Again." Ace pushed himself up, dusting off his shorts and glaring. "You didn't even hit me. You just pushed the air." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Arashi replied, settling back into a relaxed stance. "The goal isn't to hit the hardest. It's to win." This was their daily ritual. A dance of brotherhood forged in sweat and bruises under the watchful canopy of the Mt. Kulubo forest. They were 3 parts of a whole. Ace was the fire, the burning ambition to make a name for himself and surpass a legacy he despised. Luffy was the heart, a bottomless well of optimism and freedom, his dream as vast and untamed as the sea itself. And Arashi was the wind. He was the strategist, the anchor, the quiet storm that held them all together. He'd appeared on the island as a toddler, found by Garp in a washed-up boat with no memory and a name stitched into his blanket. Garp, in his infinite and baffling wisdom, had declared him another grandson and dumped him in the care of the mountain bandit Daiden, just as he had with Ace. But Arashi was different. From a young age, he displayed a preternatural awareness. He could sense when a predator was near, feel the subtle shifts in the wind that predicted a storm, and, most unnervingly, he could sometimes see flashes of a life that wasn't his. It came to him in fractured moments, usually when his emotions ran high. A village of ninjas. A 9-tailed beast roaring in a cage of blood-red energy. The face of a boy with dark hair and eyes filled with lightning and hatred. The crushing weight of failing to save him. Those ghostly feelings were the fuel for his ferocious protectiveness. He looked at Ace, proud and defiant, and at Luffy, grinning like an idiot as he prepared another reckless charge, and a cold dread would coil in his gut. He had a family, a real one this time. A primal, instinctual part of his very soul screamed at him, I will not lose them again. So he trained them. He took the brutal lessons Garp hammered into them, the fists of love and survival exercises, and refined them. He taught them discipline, strategy, and how to fight not just with their fists, but with their minds. He pushed them harder than anyone, because he could feel the shape of the world they were so eager to dive into, and it was filled with monsters far worse than the tigers and bears of their island home. Okay, break's over, Luffy shouted, his arms winding up like propellers. This time I'll get you for sure. Quote, Arashi just smiled. Show me. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, when the three brothers finally trudged out of the forest, covered in dirt, scrapes, and in Luffy's case, a few new knots in his rubbery limbs. The path to Dayton's shack was well worn, a muddy trail carved by their relentless passage. Luffy was, as always, talking about food. I'm so hungry I could eat a sea king. Dayton better have made a lot of meat. Do you think she made a lot of meat, Arashi? I hope so. If she doesn't have meat, I'm gonna die. You're not going to die, you idiot. Ace grumbled, walking with his hands stuffed in his pockets. He glanced at Arashi. You went easy on me today. It wasn't a question. Arashi shrugged, his gaze distant. You're getting faster. Your control is still sloppy, but you're learning to put more intent behind your strikes. It's a good first step. Ace scoffed, but a flicker of pride showed in his eyes. Praise from Arashi was rare and always earned. It meant more than 1,000 victories against anyone else. As they walked, Arashi's gaze fell on the backs of his two brothers, silhouetted against the setting sun. Ace, walking with a swagger that was all barely contained power. Luffy, bouncing on the balls of his feet, a vessel of pure, unadulterated joy. A sudden, sharp image pierced through his consciousness. So vivid it made him stop in his tracks. A flash of orange, the weight of a scroll on his back. A blonde girl with tears in her eyes. A promise made under a starlit sky. The bitter, metallic taste of failure at a place called the Valley of the End. The ghost of a memory, a phantom pain, clenched his heart. He reached out, his hand hovering in the air as if to grab onto them, to physically prevent them from ever leaving his side. Arashi, what's wrong? Luffy asked, turning back, his wide, innocent eyes full of concern. Arashi let his hand fall, a faint tremor in his fingers. He forced a small smile. Nothing. Just thinking. You're right, Luffy. I'm starving. The moment passed. The ghost receded, leaving only the cold echo of its warning. He quickened his pace, falling in step between them. A silent guardian flanked by fire and freedom. Dayton's shack was a chaotic symphony of shouting, clattering plates, and the smell of roasting meat. The Dayton family, a motley crew of mountain bandits who were more inept than intimidating, were already halfway through their dinner. You three are late, Dayton bellowed, waving a chicken leg threateningly. I oughta let you starve. But you made meat. Luffy cheered, his eyes turning to hearts as he spotted the mountain of food on the table. He was already stretching an arm to snag a piece. Dayton smacked his hand with a ladle. Wash up first, you filthy animals. As they cleaned up at the pump outside, a commotion from the direction of the gray terminal, the massive junk heap that served as Boa Kingdom's lawless underbelly, caught Arashi's attention. A few of Dayton's men, Magra and Dagra, were stumbling back towards the shack, their faces pale and their clothes torn. What happened to you two? Ace asked, his usual nonchalance replaced by a sharp curiosity. Magra was breathing heavily, clutching a wound on his arm. It's the Blue Jam pirates. They've gone crazy. They're rounding people up, grabbing anything of value. Porchimi, he's leading a group, clearing a path for their captain. Arashi's eyes narrowed. The Blue Jam pirates were a festering wound on the island, small-time thugs who preyed on the cast-offs of the gray terminal. They were usually disorganized, content with petty extortion. This sounded different, coordinated. So what? Let them have the trash heap, one of the other bandits mumbled around a mouthful of food. They're not staying in the terminal, Dagra stammered. They're talking about a job, a big one. Something about burning it all down. They mentioned the nobles from the city. A cold stillness fell over the room. Burning down the gray terminal meant burning down the homes of thousands of people, desperate and poor, but people nonetheless. Luffy looked confused. Why would they do that? Because they can, Arashi said, his voice low and hard. He was already drying his hands, his mind racing. This wasn't random violence. This was an orchestrated event. Someone from the city, a noble, had likely hired Bluejam to cleanse the area before the impending visit from the world nobles. It was the kind of casual cruelty he'd come to expect from the kingdom's elite. We should stay out of it, Dayton grunted. Though she couldn't meet their eyes. It's not our business. It's a garbage heap full of garbage people, Ace said, his voice laced with a familiar contempt for the world. But Arashi could see the conflict in his eyes. Ace hated the world, but he understood what it was to be discarded. Suddenly, a realization hit Luffy, his eyes going wide with horror. Sabo's treasure. He hid all his money for his pirate ship in the gray terminal. They'll steal it. Sabo. The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. Their sworn brother, the runaway noble boy who had dreamed of freedom more than any of them. Presumed dead after his small fishing boat was obliterated by a visiting celestial dragon's cannon. His death had been a brutal, formative lesson in the world's indifference. Ace's expression hardened into a mask of fury. He grabbed his metal pipe from where it leaned against the wall. They're not touching it. Ace, wait, Arashi commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. Stay out of this, Arashi. This is for Sabo. I'm not telling you to stop, Arashi said, grabbing his own custom-made staff, a sleek, durable weapon of ironwood. I'm telling you to think. You charge in there alone, and you'll be overwhelmed. Magra said Porchimi is leading them. He's one of their strongest. And you don't know how many men he has. He turned to Luffy. Luffy, you stay here. No way. Luffy protested, his jaw set stubbornly. Sabo was my brother, too. Arashi knelt, looking him in the eye. I know, but you and Ace rushing in headfirst is what they'll expect. You'll be the distraction. I need you to be smart. Can you do that for me? For Sabo. He knew Luffy wouldn't be able to stay put. It wasn't in his nature. But framing it this way, giving him a role, might at least make him hesitate before doing something impossibly stupid. Luffy's face scrunched up in thought, then he nodded fiercely. Okay, I'll be a smart distraction. Arashi sighed internally. It was the best he was going to get. He stood up and looked at Ace. We go in quiet. We assess their numbers and their positions. We don't fight the whole crew. We find the treasure, we secure it, and we get out. This is a surgical strike, not a brawl. Understand? Ace nodded, the fire in his eyes now focused, channeled. Surgical strike. Got it. Dayton, Arashi said, turning to the bandit leader. Keep Luffy here as long as you can. Dayton just grunted, taking a long swig from her gourd of sake. Don't get yourselves killed, you brats. It was the closest she could come to saying, be careful. Under the pale light of the moon, Arashi and Ace moved like shadows through the trees bordering the gray terminal. The stench of decay and smoke was stronger here, a miasma of human misery. Shouts and the clang of metal on metal echoed through the labyrinth of junk. Arashi held up a hand, and they both froze behind a mountain of rusted metal. He closed his eyes. This was his unique gift, the ability that truly set him apart. He called it his will force. It wasn't hockey, not yet. It was a finer, more sensitive energy. He could feel the life force of living things, the flow of the air. The very vibrations of the world around him. To his senses, the gray terminal was a chaotic mess of frightened, flickering lights, the souls of the inhabitants, and a cluster of brighter, angrier flames, the pirates. 13 of them, Arashi whispered, his eyes still closed. Clustered about 200 yards ahead. They've cornered a group of people. Porchimi is with them. He feels agitated. Stronger than the rest. Ace gripped his pipe tighter. Let's go. Wait. Arashi's eyes snapped open. The wind. It's blowing from our backs, towards them. We can use it. He pointed to a precariously stacked tower of rotting timbers and sheet metal directly above the pirates. See that? A few of those support beams are barely holding. If we can cut them, the whole thing will come down. I can't throw my pipe that far, Ace said. You don't have to, Arashi held out his hand, palm flat. He focused, drawing on the energy within him, shaping the air itself. A faint shimmer, like heat haze, appeared in front of his palm. With a sharp exhale, he thrust his hand forward. SSSSHH hing. A blade of compressed wind, invisible to the naked eye, shot through the air. It wasn't powerful enough to cut steel, but it was razor sharp. It struck one of the rotten support beams with a sharp crack. The beam splintered. The massive pile of junk groaned, shifted, but held. It's not enough, Ace hissed. I know, Arashi replied. His breathing steady. I just needed to weaken it. Now, for the noise. He gestured to Ace. Your turn. On my mark, create a diversion to the east. Draw their attention. I'll handle the rest. Ace grinned, a feral, wolfish expression. Now you're talking. He slipped away, moving silently through the shadows. Arashi waited, counting the seconds, feeling the positions of the pirates with his senses. He saw Porchimi, a big, club-wielding man, barking orders, his life force a belligerent orange flame. Then, a loud crash echoed from the east, followed by Ace's unmistakable battle cry. Hey, you trash pirates. Looking for me. As one, the pirates spun around. It's the brat from the forest. One of them yelled. Get him. Porchimi roared. That was the opening. As ta men de zu yi li bei zhuan yi, Arashi zai si shen chu shou. JC. Ta mei yu ji zhao yi gi dao pian. Ta ba yi ji li su zhao sheng yi gu meng lai de ji zhong de chi lu. Ta mei yu ji jia miao zun yao yao yu zhui de le ji dui. Shi miao zun la ta hu mian de yi gi ju da de sheng shu de fan chuan fan bu. The wind he created, a silent, powerful gust, slammed into the sailcloth. The cloth billowed out like a spinnaker in a typhoon, acting as a massive pusher. It shoved against the weakened junk pile with immense force. Kree-yak. Kaboom. The entire mountain of debris collapsed, not on top of the pirates, but directly in front of them, creating a massive, impassable wall of twisted metal and splintered wood. It separated Porchimi and half his crew from Ace, and from the terrified civilians they had been tormenting. Now, Arashi yelled, leaping from their hiding spot. Ace, seeing the plan unfold, didn't hesitate. He charged the pirates on his side of the barrier, his pipe swinging in a furious arc. Arashi sprinted towards the other side, where Porchimi was roaring in frustration, trying to find a way around the new wall. The civilians, seeing their chance, were already scattering into the labyrinthine alleys of the terminal. You, Porchimi bellowed, his eyes locking onto Arashi. I remember you. You're the other one. Arashi didn't waste time with banter. He was already in motion. Porchimi swung his massive, spiky club in a horizontal arc meant to pulp him. It was a powerful, straightforward attack. And utterly predictable. Arashi slid, a low-to-the-ground movement that was impossibly fluid. The club whistled over his head. As he slid, he channeled his will force into his ironwood staff. He jabbed it forward, not at Porchimi's body, but at the ground just in front of his feet. A compressed burst of air erupted from the tip of the staff, kicking up a cloud of dirt, gravel, and filth directly into the pirate's face. Gah, my eyes. Porchimi staggered back, blinded. Arashi was already up, using Porchimi's disorientation. He flowed around the larger man, his staff moving in a series of short, precise strikes. A jab to the nerve cluster behind the knee, causing the leg to buckle. A sharp crack against the wrist, forcing him to drop his club. A final, hard shove to the back, sending the big man sprawling face first into the dirt. It was over in 5 seconds. The remaining pirates on his side stared, dumbfounded, at their defeated commander. Arashi raised his staff, its tip humming with a faint, contained energy. His blue eyes were cold. Leave, he said, his voice quiet, yet carry-eye. Ing an absolute authority that brooked no argument. Or you'll join him. Fear, a more powerful motivator than greed, took hold. They dropped their weapons and fled into the darkness. On the other side of the barricade, the sounds of fighting died down. A moment later, Ace vaulted over the top of the junk pile, landing lightly beside Arashi. He had a new cut on his cheek, but he was grinning. Not bad, Ace admitted, nudging the unconscious Porchimi with his boot. Using the environment. Very strategic. It's more efficient, Arashi replied, already scanning the area. Now, Where did Luffy? Right here. A voice chirped from above. They looked up. Luffy was perched atop a different junk pile, a massive sack slung over his shoulder. It was bulging and clinking. Sabo's treasure. Luffy, I told you to wait. Arashi called up, a mix of exasperation and relief in his voice. You told me to be a smart distraction. Luffy grinned, patting the sack. I distracted the treasure from the pirates. See, smart. Arashi couldn't help but let out a small, tired laugh. Ace just shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. Come on, Arashi said, his good humor fading as he remembered the bigger picture. We need to get this back to the forest. This whole place is a tinderbox, and someone just handed Blue Jam a match. They made their way back, moving quickly and quietly, a triumphant but uneasy procession. They had won the battle. But Arashi knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the war for Dawn Island was about to begin. And it would end in fire. The three brothers spent the next few years in a state of heightened readiness. The Grey Terminal was burned, just as Arashi had predicted, an act of calculated genocide by the kingdom's nobility. The incident solidified Ace's hatred for the aristocracy and Luffy's simple, black and white view of justice. For Arashi, it was a grim affirmation of the world's cruelty, a world that mirrored the shadows of his fragmented past. They grew stronger. Ace's haki began to bloom, his fists now wreathed in genuine flames from his newly eaten Mera Mera no Mi. Luffy's mastery of his rubber body became more creative, if not more tactical. And Arashi's will force deepened. He could now create sustained currents of wind, form shields of pressurized air, and his sensory abilities sharpened to a razor's edge. He could feel a person's intentions, fear, anger, deceit, like a change in atmospheric pressure. He was their commander, their strategist, their unshakable core. The day came, as Arashi always knew it would. They stood on a cliff overlooking the east blue. The sea a brilliant, endless blue. Ace, now 17, stood beside a small, self-built vessel, the Striker. It was time. Luffy, 14, was crying, big, fat tears rolling down his cheeks. Take me with you, Ace. I'm strong now, too. Ace ruffled Luffy's hair, a rare, gentle gesture. You're not ready, crybaby. We made a promise. We'll all be pirates, but we'll be captains of our own ships. I'm going first to make a name for myself. So big, it'll even reach you. He then turned to Arashi, who stood silently, his arms crossed. There were no tears in his eyes. Just an intensity that was more profound than any weeping. You're not going to try and stop me? Ace asked, a hint of a challenge in his voice. No, Arashi said calmly. This is your path, your dream. I would never stand in the way of that. He stepped forward, putting a hand on Ace's shoulder. His grip was firm, grounding. I have only one thing to ask of you. What's that? Arashi's blue eyes bored into his. They held the weight of 1,000 battles, of a past life's regrets. Don't die, Ace. The words were simple, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a plea, it was a command, a raw, desperate order from one soul to another. Ace was taken aback, seeing a depth of emotion in his brother he rarely glimpsed. Arashi's voice dropped to a near whisper, for Ace's ears alone. No matter where you go, or what you become, we are brothers. I will not lose you. The unspoken postscript hung in the air between them, not again. Ace, for once, didn't have a cocky retort. He just nodded, his throat tight. I won't. He boarded his ship. With a wave and a trademark grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, he set off, his small vessel cutting a path towards the horizon, towards his destiny. Luffy wailed, his cries carried away by the sea breeze. Arashi stood motionless, a statue carved from stone, watching until the Striker was just a speck on the vast ocean. He let one brother go in pursuit of a dark ambition once before, and it had shattered his world. This time felt different. This was a pursuit of a dream, of glory. But the fear, the cold, familiar fear of loss, was the same. He placed a hand on Luffy's head, who was now sniffling. He'll be fine, Luffy. You think so? I know so. Arashi lied, or perhaps, willed into existence. And in 3 years, it'll be your turn. And I'll be right behind you. He would let Luffy chase his dream of becoming the Pirate King. He would let him be the radiant, free spirit he was born to be. But Arashi's own path was different. It wasn't about a title or a treasure. His dream was simpler, and infinitely more complex. He would build a world strong enough to protect the people he loved. And he would tear down anyone, be they pirate, marine, or god, who dared to threaten it. The wind whipped around him, tugging at his coat, a restless energy mirroring the storm in his soul. He had a family to protect, and a promise to keep. Far away, in a place of pristine, sterile opulence, a world away from the salty air business of Dawn Island, a figure sat in shadow. The room was vast and silent, its walls adorned with symbols of absolute authority. This was the heart of the world government, the holy land of Mary Geoise. A man in the white suit Dijane of Cipher Pole Aegis Zero stood at attention, his face a mask of emotionless professionalism. He held a data slate in his gloved hands. Saint Icarus Sama, the agent said, his voice flat. The report you requested. Historical atmospheric and energy readings from the East Blue. A hand, slender and adorned with a single, ostentatious ring, emerged from the shadow to take the slate. The figure, Saint Icarus, leaned forward, his face partially illuminated by the slate's glow. He had the delicate, haughty features of a celestial dragon, but his eyes were not filled with the usual vacant arrogance. They were sharp, intelligent, and cold as the void. He scrolled through the data, his expression unchanging. Decades of boring, predictable readings. Then, he stopped. A date from 13 years prior. An anomalous energy signature recorded on a backwater island called Dawn. It was a brief, powerful spike, an energy that fit no known classification. It wasn't the wavelength of a devil fruit awakening. It wasn't the signature of hockey. It was something else. Something primordial, interesting. Saint Icarus murmured, his voice a silken whisper. A burst of unclassified life force. Faded as quickly as it appeared. Shall I dispatch a team to investigate, my lord? The CP0 agent asked. Icarus considered it for a moment, his finger tapping on the slate. The energy was potent, but it was a ghost, a 13-year-old echo. There were more pressing matters. He growing insolence of the so-called worst generation. The whispers of revolution. The troublesome persistence of the will of D. He waved a dismissive hand. No, it is a statistical anomaly. A footnote. There are real fires to extinguish. But, I am a collector of loose threads. He made a few keystrokes on the slate, creating a new file. He typed in a designation, his lips curling into a thin, predatory smile. Log the event. File it under the designation, Anomaly Maelstrom. Keep the file open. One day, we may want to see what caused the ripple. The agent bowed. As you command. Saint Icarus leaned back into the shadows. The data slate extinguishing, plunging the room back into near darkness. A single, insignificant energy spike on a forgotten island. It was nothing. And yet, he was a god. And gods, above all else, do not tolerate anomalies. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Serpent's Gaze. The sea in the first half of the Grand Line was a fickle beast. One moment it was placid as a lake. The next it was a churning cauldron of black water and snarling waves. Arashi's ship, the Tempest, cut through the swell with an uncanny grace. It was a sleek, single-masted vessel, built for speed and stealth. Not for broadside battles. It reflected its captain perfectly. On the deck, a grizzled man with a permanent squint and hands calloused from a lifetime of wrestling with ropes and rudders stood at the helm. This was Kale, his navigator, a man who could read the stars and the currents like a well-loved book. Standing near the mast, polishing a pair of wickedly sharp hand axes, was Jin, his first mate. Jin was a mountain of quiet muscle, a former bounty hunter from the West Blue who had joined Arashi not for treasure, but because he'd seen the young captain dismantle an entire pie. Raid crew without killing a single man and decided that was a philosophy worth following. They weren't a large crew, just 5 of them in total, but each was an expert in their field. They were the Tempest Pirates, known in whispers as a crew that was best left alone. Their captain, Maelstrom Arashi, had a reputation for being dangerously pragmatic. He didn't raid towns or seek plunder. He simple. Why moved towards his own inscrutable goals, and any who stood in his way were swept aside with the impersonal force of a gale. Ship off the starboard bow, Captain. Kale called out, his voice cutting through the salty air. Flying the flag of gallows, Jack. They're turning to intercept. Arashi didn't move from his position at the prow, his back to them as he stared out at the horizon. He wore a simple, high-collared dark blue coat over a gray shirt, practical clothes for a life at sea. Let them come, he said, his voice calm. Within 10 minutes, the other ship, a brutish, ugly vessel bristling with cannons, pulled alongside them. A corpulent man with a tangled black beard and a tri-cornered hat stood on its forecastle, flanked by a dozen grimy-looking pirates. Well, what have we here? The man boomed, a gold-toothed sneer splitting his face. The famous Tempest. Looks more like a dinghy. I am. Gallows. Jack. And I'll be taking your ship, your supplies, and any women you've got hidden below decks. Jin's hand tightened on his axe. Captain. Arashi finally turned, his blue eyes sweeping over the opposing crew. His gaze was unnervingly placid, like the deep ocean. You have us outnumbered and outgunned, Jack. Arashi stated, his voice carrying easily across the water. That's a tactical advantage. Jack laughed, pleased. Glad you see it my way, boy. Makes this easier. Surrender now. However, Arashi continued, his tone unchanged. Your rudder is exposed, your helmsman is drunk, and your ship is listing 2 degrees to port from poor ballast distribution. You're a sloppy captain. Jack's smile vanished. What did you say, you brat? Arashi simply held up his right hand, his fingers slightly curled. He wasn't looking at Jack anymore, but at the water between the 2 ships. I will give you one warning. Change your course. My business today is not with you. Warning. I'll give you a warning. Jack roared, pulling a flintlock pistol. Fire the cannons. Blow them out of the water. Just as his crew scrambled to obey, Arashi clenched his fist. It happened in an instant. A column of air between the ships twisted, compressed, and solidified into a battering ram of pure kinetic force. It didn't make a sound, but the ocean convulsed. A massive wave, shaped and directed by Arashi's will, erupted from the sea. It didn't strike the hull of Jack's ship, it met against its rudder with the force of a battering ram. There was a deafening crack of splintering wood. The pirate at the helm screamed as the wheel spun wildly, shattering his arms. Gallows. Jack's ship lurched violently, its course thrown into chaos as it lost all steering. It began to turn in a helpless circle. Arashi lowered his hand. Jin, full sail. Kale, keep us on course. Aye, Captain. They responded in unison. The Tempest surged forward, leaving the crippled, circling pirate ship in its wake. Jack was screaming curses, but they were quickly lost to the wind. Jin came to stand beside Arashi, shaking his head. You could have sunk them. It would have been a waste of energy, Arashi replied, his eyes once again on the horizon. They're no longer a problem. It was this absolute efficiency, this control, that defined him. He never used more force than was necessary. A battle won with a whisper was more impressive to him than one won with a roar. They sailed for another hour in silence. The mood was calm, routine. Then, a dark speck appeared in the sky. It grew larger, resolving into the familiar shape of a news coup. The bird landed gracefully on the ship's railing, a rolled-up newspaper tied to its leg. Arashi paid for the paper, unrolling it as the bird took off. He scanned the headlines. Global economic news, a report on a skirmish in the New World, the usual propaganda from the world government. Then his eyes fell on a smaller article, tucked away on the front page but accompanied by a grainy photograph. His blood ran cold. The world seemed to slow down. The sound of the waves, the cry of the gulls, the creak of the ship, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. The photograph was of Ace. His proud, defiant face was bruised and bloodied. The headline was a punch to the gut. Whitebeard Commander, Fire Fist, Ace captured. Defeated by Warlord Blackbeard, to be transferred to Impel Down. The newspaper crumpled in his fist. A sudden, oppressive pressure filled the air around him. The temperature on the deck dropped by 10 degrees. Kale shivered, pulling his coat tighter. Jin took a step back, his eyes wide with alarm, watching his captain. He'd only seen Arashi like this once before, when they'd stumbled upon a slaver operation. Arashi's face was a mask of ice, but his blue eyes burned with a frigid, terrifying fire. The wind around the Tempest began to whip and churn, no longer obeying the natural currents but swirling in a vortex around Arashi himself. Ace, The name was a ghost of a whisper, a breath of pure, cold fury. He remembered his promise on the cliffs of Dawn Island. I will not lose you. And the ghostly echo of a past life. I failed to save Sasuke. I will not fail again. Captain, Jin asked cautiously, his voice low. Arashi took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing the maelstrom of his emotions back down. The wind died as suddenly as it had risen. The unnatural chill dissipated. He straightened his back, his expression returning to one of cold, hard resolve. The grief was still there, a hot stone in his chest, but now it was fuel. Kale, he said, his voice dangerously level. Set a new course. We're going to the Grand Line's second half. Kale's eyes widened. To the new world. Captain, we're not prepared. We're not going to the new world, Arashi corrected, turning to face his small crew. We're going to the calm belt. An uneasy silence fell. Kale paled. The calm belt. That's suicide. It's the nest of the Sea Kings. And it's the fastest route to our destination, Arashi stated. He spread the crumpled newspaper on a crate, smoothing it out. Ace is being taken to Impel Down. To get there, we need to cross the calm belt. The Marines can do it because their ships are lined with seastone, masking their presence. We don't have that luxury. Then how? Jin asked, his practical mind already seeing the impossibility. Arashi tapped a section of the map, an area shrouded in mystery and dire warnings. Legends say there's an island deep within the calm belt where the Sea Kings dare not tread. An island ruled by women, a place no man has seen and returned from. He looked up, his gaze meeting theirs. Amazon Lily. It's ruled by one of the 7 warlords. The pirate empress, Boa Hancock. A warlord. Kale swallowed hard. They'll kill us on sight. If the Sea Kings don't get us first. They might, Arashi conceded. But it's the only path. I'm not asking you to come. This is my fight, my family. Jin stepped forward, crossing his muscular arms. Where you go, we go, Captain. You know that. Kale sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Damn it all. Fine. But if I get eaten by a sea serpent, I'm blaming you. Arashi gave them a rare, small smile. It was tight, but it was genuine. Understood. Let's get moving. We don't have time to waste. Navigating the calm belt was an experience in profound, primordial terror. The moment they crossed the invisible boundary, the wind died completely. The sea turned to glass. The air became unnervingly still. Jin and the others had to row, their rhythmic grunts the only sound besides the gentle lapping of water against the hull. And then they saw them. Immense shadows, larger than islands, moved in the fathomless depths beneath them. The water would occasionally bulge upwards as a creature of impossible size passed close to the surface. A serpent's head, wider than their ship was long, rose from the water a mile away, its vacant eyes scanning the placid sea before it submerged again. The crew was drenched in a cold sweat, but they followed Arashi's lead. He stood at the prow, his eyes closed, his senses stretched to their absolute limit. He wasn't navigating by sight, but by feeling. He could feel the colossal life forces of the Sea Kings, vast and ancient. Like sleeping gods. And he could feel a channel, a path between them. It was like walking a tightrope over a pit of dragons. He could also feel their destination. It was a beacon of powerful, concentrated life force, an island that pulsed with so much energy that it seemed to repel the great beasts. It was Amazon Lily. 10 degrees to starboard, Kale, Arashi said, his voice a low command. There's a current here. We can ride it. They followed his guidance without question. For 2 days, they moved through the graveyard of ships, a silent testament to those who had failed this passage. Finally, a lush, green island rose from the sea, a vibrant splash of life in the dead calm. They had made it. Arashi guided the Tempest into a secluded cove, the jungle canopy hiding them from view. Jin, stay with the ship. Keep the engine warm. The rest of you, with me. Weapons down. We are guests here, until proven otherwise. They had barely set foot on the white sandy beach when the forest came alive. Figures dropped from the trees, landing silently on the sand. Dozens of them. Tall, powerful women clad in skins and leather, armed with bows and snake-handled spears. Their eyes were hard, their stances predatory. Arrows, tipped with obsidian and coated in poison, were nocked and aimed at their hearts. You are men. One of them, a woman with dark hair and a confident air, said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. On this island, that is a crime punishable by death. Arashi's crew tensed, their hands inching towards their weapons. Stand down, Arashi commanded, his voice firm. He took a step forward, his own hands open and visible. We mean you no harm. We are only seeking passage. The woman scoffed. The only passage you will find is to the afterlife. She gave a sharp nod. Kill them. A volley of arrows hissed through the air. Arashi moved. He was a blur, not of speed, but of fluid motion. He swept his arm in a wide arc, and a wall of solid wind erupted in front of him. The arrows slammed into the invisible barrier and clattered harmlessly to the sand. The Kuja warriors stared, shocked. Before they could knock another volley, Arashi was among them. He did not strike. He did not kick. He flowed through their ranks like water. A woman lunged with a spear. He sidestepped, his hand brushing her wrist, redirecting the thrust into the sand. Another swung a sword. He ducked under it, his palm tapping the back of her knee, causing her to stumble and fall. He moved from one to the next, a dance of pure defensive skill. Focused. Gust of wind snatched a bow from a warrior's grasp. A gentle push to a shoulder threw another off balance. He disarmed a dozen warriors in as many seconds, his movements economical and precise. He never once raised his voice or let the calm resolve on his face waver. The lead warrior, Marguerite, watched in disbelief. He wasn't fighting them. He was neutralizing them. It was effortless, humiliatingly so. Two larger women, Hancock's own sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, finally intervened. They were far stronger than the others. Sandersonia came at him, her body shifting, growing as she activated her devil fruit powers. Becoming a massive snake woman, Arashi didn't flinch. As her giant fist descended, he stomped his foot. The ground beneath her buckled as a targeted updraft threw her off balance. He used her momentum, flowing around her and pressing two fingers into a nerve cluster in her neck. She grunted, a jolt of static electricity running through her, and she stumbled back, her arm going numb. He had proven his point. He stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by defeated but unharmed warriors. My name is Arashi, he said, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. I have come to speak with your empress. I have no quarrel with the Kuja. The situation had escalated beyond the guards. He was brought, not as a prisoner, but as a dangerous curiosity, to the heart of the city. He was led into a vast, opulent throne room, filled with hundreds of Kuja warriors, all watching him with a mixture of hatred and grudging awe. At the far end of the room was a massive throne, upon which a figure lounged. Hidden behind a curtain, an old, diminutive woman, Elder Nyan, hobbled forward. You have caused quite a stir, man-child. It has been a long time since a man set foot on this island and lived to speak of it. I am not here for conquest or trouble, Arashi stated simply. I need the assistance of the pirate empress. A voice, melodic and filled with an almost tangible arrogance, drifted from behind the curtain. Assistance. A lowly man, daring to ask for my help. The curtain was swept aside. The world seemed to hold its breath. Boa Hancock, the pirate empress and the most beautiful woman in the world, was revealed. She was a vision of impossible perfection, her figure flawless, her face a masterpiece of divine artistry. She lounged on her throne, one leg kicked up, looking down her nose at him with an expression of supreme boredom and contempt. His crew, even the stoic Jin, were slack-jawed, their cheeks flushing. They were utterly captivated. But Arashi didn't see what they saw. He looked at Boa Hancock, and his sage's eye, the refined evolution of his will force, saw past the facade. It was like looking through a pane of flawless glass to the raging storm behind it. He saw the breathtaking beauty, yes, but beneath it, he saw the flickering, terrified soul of a young girl. He saw a shadow, a brand of shame and trauma burned not onto her skin, but onto her very spirit. He saw the self-loathing that she masked with arrogance, the terror she hid with contempt. He saw a person who had been so profoundly broken that she had rebuilt herself as an untouchable goddess. Because the alternative was to remain a helpless victim. He didn't feel lust. He didn't feel intimidated. He felt a deep, gut-wrenching pang of empathy. He knew that kind of pain. He knew what it was to carry a darkness inside you that no one else could see. Hancock noticed his strange lack of reaction. It irritated her. She stood, striking a pose, her hands forming a heart. You do not kneel. You do not beg for forgiveness for the crime of your existence. Perhaps you need motivation. She tilted her head back. Mellow. A beam of soft pink light, shaped like a heart, shot from her hands directly at Arashi. The Kuja warriors sighed, knowing what was to come. Any man, or woman, with a shred of impure thought would be turned to solid stone. The beam washed over Arashi. And nothing happened. He stood perfectly still, the pink energy dissipating around him. He didn't even blink. His expression hadn't changed. It was still one of quiet, unnerving understanding. The throne room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Hancock's eyes widened, her arrogant posture faltering for a fraction of a second. Impossible. No man was immune. Not completely. Luffy had been immune due to his purity of heart. But this was different. This man wasn't looking at her with a child's innocence. He was looking at her as if he could see straight through her. What is this? She stammered, a flicker of her true, panicked self showing through. Why are you not stone? Do you have no desire? No feelings? I have feelings, Arashi said, his voice soft, but it carried in the silence. But when I look at you, I don't see the pirate empress the world fears. Enraged and deeply unsettled, she snapped. What do you see, then, you insect? His next word struck her harder than any physical blow. I see someone who is afraid. A collective gasp went through the Kuja. No one had ever spoken to their empress like that. Hancock's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. The ear he had correctly identified curdled into rage. You dare, she shrieked. You will die for that insolence. Guards, take him to the arena. I will execute him myself. The arena was a gladiatorial pit, surrounded by cheering, bloodthirsty Kuja. Arashi stood in the center, his ironwood staff held loosely in one hand. His crew had been restrained, forced to watch. Hancock entered from the opposite side, her face a thundercloud of cold fury. You have sealed your fate, man. I will make you kneel before you die, begging for the forgiveness I will never grant. She was on him in a flash, a whirlwind of motion. Her hockey-infused kick was aimed at his head, powerful enough to shatter rock. Arashi didn't try to block it. He swayed back, the kick whistling past his nose, and used the wind its passage to help spin himself around. He flowed with her attack, a leaf in the storm. You're fast, he stated calmly, creating distance between them. But your anger makes you sloppy. Silence, she screamed, launching a flurry of kicks and jabs. She was a master of combat, graceful and deadly. But every attack was met with the same infuriating response. Redirection, evasion. He moved around her, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground, his staff a blur that deflected her strikes, always guiding them away, never meeting them with force. You expect your enemies to be dazzled by you, he said. His voice even as he ducked under a high kick. You rely on them hesitating. It's become a crutch. Slave arrow, she yelled, leaping back and creating a massive heart of energy. Hundreds of pink, arrow-shaped projectiles flew at him. Arashi spun his staff, creating a vortex of wind in front of him. The arrows, made of light and will, were caught in the cyclone. Their energy was diffused, their forms torn apart until they were nothing but harmless pink mist. Hancock was panting now, a mixture of exertion and sheer frustration. He wasn't even trying to attack her. He was playing with her, humiliating her. Fight me, she bellowed. I am, he replied. I'm just not fighting the way you want. With a final roar of frustration, she abandoned all finesse and charged him, her fist glowing with the dark sheen of armament hockey. It was a straightforward, overpowering blow. And it was exactly what he was waiting for. Just before her fist connected, Arashi exhaled. He didn't move back, he moved in. He created a small, sudden vacuum of air directly in front of him. It wasn't strong enough to harm her, but it was enough to disrupt the air pressure. Her punch, traveling at immense speed, hit this pocket of nothingness. For a microsecond, the resistance she expected wasn't there. Her body lurched forward, her balance utterly broken. In that instant of imbalance, Arashi flowed past her attack. He spun inside her guard. A phantom. The entire arena gasped. Time seemed to stop. He was behind her, his body pressed lightly against hers. His open palm was raised, stopping a single, breathtaking inch from the pale, delicate skin of her throat. Checkmate. He could have snapped her neck. He could have delivered a crippling blow. He could have won. The roars of the crowd died into a shocked, absolute silence. He didn't move. He just held the position, his hand trembling slightly with the contained power. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear, his voice low and for her alone. Yet it seemed to echo in the stillness of the arena. True strength isn't making others kneel, he whispered, the words resonating with a conviction that was absolute. It's having the power to destroy everything, and choosing to protect instead. He lowered his hand and stepped back. Hancock stood frozen, her back to him. Her body was trembling. The roar of the crowd, the sting of the sun, the presence of her warriors, it all faded away. All she could hear were his words, echoing in her soul. Choosing to protect. All her life, her strength had been a weapon born of fear, a shield to keep the world at bay. It was a tool to make others kneel, so she would never have to kneel again. This man, this anomaly, he saw through it all. He had the power to destroy her, and he had chosen not to. He had looked at her, and instead of a goddess or a monster, he had seen a person. She slowly turned, her face a maelstrom of confusion, fury, and a terrifying new emotion that felt like a crack forming in the stone wall around her heart. She raised a trembling hand and pointed at the exit. Everyone, get out, she commanded, her voice cracking. The Kuja, stunned, scrambled to obey their empress. Soon, only Arashi, his restrained crew, and Hancock remained in the vast, silent arena. Arashi stood patiently, his expression now gentle. He had broken through her armor. Now, he would see what lay beneath. My brother is going to be executed, he said, his voice returning to its calm, level tone. He is in Impel Down. I need to get to him. That is why I came here. I am asking for your help, Empress. Hancock stared at him, her beautiful face a portrait of turmoil. This man had defeated her. He had seen her deepest shame. He had spoken a truth that shook the very foundations of her existence. He was a puzzle she couldn't comprehend, a storm she couldn't control. And for the first time since she had escaped that living hell, she was not afraid of a man, but desperately, terrifyingly intrigued. She took a ragged breath, her voice barely a whisper. I will take you. It wasn't a promise born of love or infatuation. It was a decision born of a desperate need to understand the one person in the world who had seen the terrified slave girl cowering behind the Empress's throne, and had not looked away. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Depths of Impel Down. The journey to Impel Down was a study in taut silence. Hancock's massive ship, pulled by two colossal and venomous Yuta sea serpents, cut through the sea with an imperial disdain for its dangers. On deck, the Kuja warriors eyed Arashi and his crew with a mixture of suspicion and a newfound, grudging respect. Arashi had earned his place, not by force, but by a show of strength that was paradoxically gentle. He had defeated their coup, e'en without leaving a single scratch on her. It was a concept they were still struggling to process. Arashi spent most of the voyage standing near the railing, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon, a silent sentinel consumed by his thoughts. His mind was a whirlwind of tactical calculations and gnawing anxiety. Ace. The name was a constant, throbbing drumbeat in his soul. He could feel the seconds ticking away, each one a grain of sand falling in the hourglass of his brother's life. Hancock found him there as dusk settled, the sky bleeding into shades of violet and indigo. She approached him, her usual retinue of fawning warriors absent for once. She had shed her imperious public persona, leaving behind a woman who seemed uncertain, almost hesitant. The air is colder here, she said, her voice soft. It was an innocuous statement, a way to break the silence that had stretched between them since the arena. We're approaching the gates of justice, Arashi replied without turning. The currents are different, colder, deeper. He could feel the massive, unnatural sea gate long before it was visible, a dead spot in the world's natural energy. They stood in silence for another minute. He only sounded the hiss of the Yuta cutting through the water. Why? Hancock finally asked, the single word heavy with unspoken questions. Why are you not stone? Why did you not kill me? Why do you look at me like that? Arashi turned to face her. The fading light caught in his blue eyes, making them seem impossibly deep. Why what, Empress? You are not like other men, she stated, her voice tight. They are beasts, ruled by greed, lust, and arrogance. They see only what they want to take. But you look at me, and I do not see that in your eyes. Perhaps you've only met the wrong kind of men, he suggested, his tone gentle. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. There is no other kind. Not for me. The world is divided into those who grovel, and those who would put me back in chains. I have built my entire life on this truth. She clutched her arms, a flicker of the old terror in her eyes. My strength, my beauty, they are a fortress. A weapon to ensure I am never weak again. A fortress can also be a prison. Arashi said quietly. He took a small step closer, a breach of the formidable space she always kept around herself. She flinched but didn't retreat. You asked me why your power didn't work on me. It's because my will is anchored to something else. Something more important than desire. Your brother. My family, he corrected. I have lost family before. I learned in the cruelest way possible that power is meaningless if you can't protect those you love. I'm not here to conquer anything, Empress. I'm here to save my brother. It's the only thing that matters. He spoke of a world he dreamed of. Not the one that was. A world where people were judged by their actions, not their birthright. Where a title like Celestial Dragon was a mark of shame, not divinity. He didn't preach, he just spoke. His words painting a picture of a world built on freedom and responsibility, not power and subjugation. Hancock listened, mesmerized. His words resonated with the deepest part of her being. The part that hated the world nobles with a venomous passion. He wasn't just talking about abstract ideals, he was voicing the silent scream she had carried in her soul since she was a child. He was putting words to her pain and offering not pity, but a solution. A better world. You dream of the impossible, she whispered, though she wanted to believe him. The impossible is just a challenge that hasn't been met yet, Arashi countered. A faint, confident smile touched his lips. My younger brother is going to be king of the pirates. Compared to that, changing the world seems almost reasonable. The conversation was interrupted by the appearance of the gates of justice, a pair of impossibly huge doors standing sentinel in the middle of the ocean. They swung open with a groan that seemed to shake the very foundations of the sea, granting them passage into the eerie, triangular current that connected the three great government strongholds, Marine headquarters, Eni's lobby, and their destination. Impel down. The great underwater prison was a terrifying sight. A massive, tiered tower plunging from the surface into the dark, crushing depths of the ocean. Each level was a different, more horrific hell. Arashi could feel it with his will force, a symphony of despair, a miasma of lost hope and screaming souls. And somewhere in that abyss was Ace. Hancock's status as a warlord granted them entry. The warden, Magellan, was absent, preparing for the inevitable chaos Ace's presence would bring. Instead, they were greeted by the new chief warden, Hannibal, a man who say ambition practically radiated off him in greasy waves, and vice warden Domino, a woman whose stern professionalism was a thin veneer over her own discomfort. Empress Hancock, what an unexpected honor, Hannibal gushed, practically bowing in half. To what do we owe this pleasure? I have grown bored, Hancock declared, slipping back into her arrogant persona as if it were a cloak. She gestured vaguely at Arashi. I heard the famous Fire Fist was here. I came to see the man who dared to challenge Whitebeard's authority. Arashi was subjected to a full-body search, a humiliating but necessary part of the plan. They cuffed him with seastone, the cold, dead material sucking at his energy, making his will force feel sluggish and distant. It was a deeply unpleasant sensation, like being partially submerged in stagnant water. He is clean, Domino announced, her voice crisp. But regulations are clear. All visitors, even the Empress's entourage, must be disarmed and monitored. He is my personal property, Hancock said with a dismissive wave. He will remain with me. Hannibal, eager to curry favor, immediately acquiesced. The plan was working. They were escorted to a central elevator, a massive cage that would take them down into the prison's depths. As they descended, Hancock leaned close to Arashi, her long hair brushing against his cheek. It was a gesture that looked intimate to the guards. But her whisper was pure strategy. They are taking us to level 6, the eternal hell. Ace will be there, she murmured. The guards will be everywhere. How will you find him? Let me worry about that. Arashi whispered back. Even with the sea stone cuffs, his senses weren't completely nullified. They were just muted. He closed his eyes, filtering out the cacophony of misery around him. He was searching for a specific signature, a life force that burned like a miniature sun. He was searching for fire. As the elevator descended past level 3, the starvation hell, a new sensation pricked at his senses. It was a familiar energy. Reckless, boundless, and utterly idiotic. A rubbery supernova of pure, unadulterated will. Luffy. Arashi's eyes snapped open. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. Of course, Luffy wouldn't wait. Of course, he'd charge headfirst into the most secure prison in the world with no plan whatsoever. Change of plans, he whispered to Hancock. I need a distraction. A big one. Hancock glanced at him, intrigued. What are you going to do? Improvise, he said, his eyes gleaming with a light she was beginning to find dangerously captivating. The elevator shuddered to a halt at level 4, the blazing hell. The heat was immense, a dry, suffocating furnace. As the gates opened, chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Guards were running, shouting about an intruder. A massive riot was underway. Prisoners were loose, battling guards and the monstrous blue gorillas, the Bluegori. And in the center of it all was Luffy, his body steaming from the heat. Bouncing from one fight to the next with a manic grin on his face. Perfect, Arashi breathed. He brought his cuffed hands together. The sea stone was a powerful suppressor, but it wasn't absolute. It was like trying to dam a river with a leaky wall. If he applied enough focused pressure, he could force a trickle through. He focused all his will force, all his intent, on the single link of chain between the cuffs. The metal began to hum, vibrating at a frequency too high to see. Snap. The link shattered. Arashi was free. Domino and the guards spun around at the sound, their eyes wide with shock. He's escaped his. Domino's words were cut off as Arashi moved. He was a blur. He didn't attack them. He simply shoved Hancock forward, towards the stunned Hannibal. Forgive me, Empress, he said. Then vaulted over the elevator railing, dropping into the fiery chaos of level 4. Hancock, a brilliant improviser herself, didn't miss a beat. She feigned a stumble, falling into Hannibal's arms and letting out a theatrical cry of distress. He pushed me. The brute. Capture him immediately. How dare he lay his filthy hands on me? The guards were torn. Protect the warlord, or pursue the impossibly fast prisoner who had just vanished into a full-blown riot. The distraction was perfect. Arashi landed on the burning stone floor of level 4, the heat barely registering. His senses, now free of the sea stone, exploded outwards. He could feel Luffy, a beacon of chaotic energy, getting closer. He could also feel the powerful, oppressive life force of the Warden, Magellan, moving down from the upper levels. And there was something else. A cold, sharp presence. Unnatural. He cut through the riot, a ghost in the inferno. He flowed around battling prisoners and guards, his movements efficient. He might as well have been invisible. He saw Luffy send a Bluegori flying with a gum-gum bazooka, then get clotheslined by another. Classic Luffy. A little help here, Luffy yelled, pinned under the massive blue beast. Arashi appeared beside him. He didn't even look at the Bluegori. He just flicked his wrist. A blade of wind, sharp and precise, shot out and severed the muscle in the creature's ankle. The Bluegori howled and collapsed, its leg giving out. Luffy blinked, scrambling to his feet. Whoa, that was cool. Who are, Arashi? Luffy's eyes went wide, his jaw dropping. Arashi, what are you doing here? Same thing as you, apparently, Arashi said, a fond smile on his face as he took in his ridiculous younger brother. Though I like to think my plan was slightly more subtle. I have a plan, Luffy insisted. I'm gonna find Ace and bust him out. Good plan, Arashi conceded. Let's get to it. Their reunion was a whirlwind of motion. They moved as one, a two-man army. Luffy was the sledgehammer, all raw, overwhelming power. Arashi was the rapier, his movements precise, his wind-based attacks disabling enemies with surgical accuracy. They were a perfect storm of chaos and control, cutting a swath through the guards and beasts that stood in their way. They fought their way towards the stairs leading down to level 5, the freezing hell. But their path was blocked. A figure stood waiting for them, clad in the uniform of a vice warden but wearing a stark white, featureless mask. The air around him felt dead. Monkey D. Luffy. And you, the masked man said, his voice a filtered, electronic monotone. His head tilted, focusing on Arashi. Anomaly Maelstrom. Target confirmed. Arashi's blood ran cold. Maelstrom. The name the world government had for him. This wasn't a regular guard. Designation. Praetorian, the man continued, raising his hands. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wore thick, black gauntlets etched with glowing blue circuits. You will be neutral. IZED on behalf of Saint Icarus and the Aegis of the heavens. Luffy tilted his head. Who's that? Is he strong? Can I eat him? Luffy, get back, Arashi ordered, stepping in front of his brother. His senses were screaming. The man, Praetorian, had a strange energy field emanating from his gauntlets. It felt chillingly familiar. It felt like seastone, but weaponized. More potent. Let's go, Arashi. I can take him, Luffy shouted, stretching his arm back for a punch. Gomu Gomu no. Praetorian raised a hand. The circuits on his gauntlet glowed brighter. A barely visible shimmer, a distortion like heat haze, spread out from him in a 20-foot radius. Luffy's arm, stretched halfway across the corridor, suddenly went limp. It flopped to the ground like a wet noodle. Huh, what the? He tried to retract it. But it wouldn't respond. He had lost his rubbery properties. At the same time, Arashi felt a crushing pressure. His connection to the wind, to the energy around him, was choked off. His will force, which was usually a raging river, was reduced to a desperate trickle. It was like the seastone cuffs, but 100 times worse. This is a null field, Praetorian stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Within this radius, the expression of devil fruit abilities and other paracausal energy forms is suppressed. You are now just men. And I am a master of the 6 powers. He vanished. A Soru. He reappeared directly in front of Luffy, his finger extended for a Shigen. Arashi reacted on pure instinct. He shoved Luffy aside and brought his ironwood staff up to block. The finger pistol strike, imbued with incredible power, slammed into the staff. A spiderweb of cracks appeared in the durable wood. The force of the blow sent Arashi skidding back 10 feet, his arms screaming in protest. This was bad, terribly bad. His greatest weapon, his control over the wind and his sensory abilities, was gone. Luffy was, for all intents and purposes, a normal, non-stretchy human. Praetorian, however, was a master of the superhuman Rokushiki martial arts. Your anomalous energy is resilient, Praetorian observed, looking at Arashi. It is not completely nullified. Just suppressed. Saint Icarus will find this data fascinating. He came at them again, a blur of motion. Luffy, relying on pure grit and the brawler's instincts Garp had beaten into him, threw a wild punch. Praetorian sidestep, did effortlessly and delivered a brutal kick to Luffy's ribs, sending him flying into a wall. Arashi met the next attack. It was a brutal, close-quarters battle. Without his powers, Arashi was forced to rely on pure taijutsu. The hand-to-hand combat skills he had honed since childhood. He was good, incredibly good. He could read the minute shifts in his opponent's muscles, predict his strikes. But Praetorian was a monster. His body trained to the absolute peak of human potential. Arashi was on the defensive, his staff the only thing keeping Praetorian's relentless attacks at bay. Cracks and splinters were appearing all over it. Luffy staggered to his feet, blood trickling from his mouth. He was bruised and battered, but the fire in his eyes was unquenched. I'm still gonna save Ace. He coughed, charging in again. Praetorian back-kicked, sending Luffy sprawling once more without even looking at him. His focus was entirely on Arashi. You are the primary threat. Your power is an unknown variable. It must be erased. Arashi knew he couldn't win a battle of attrition. His staff was about to shatter. He needed to end this. He needed to disrupt the null field. But how? The energy was emanating from the gauntlets. An idea, born of desperation, sparked in his mind. It was reckless. It could kill him. He parried a flurry of strikes, creating a precious second of distance. He took a deep breath. And instead of trying to project his will force outwards, he drew it all in. He focused every last trickle of his suppressed energy, all the pain and fear and desperation, and coiled it into a tight, unstable ball in the center of his chest. "Luffy, get ready to run," he yelled. Praetorian seemed to sense the shift. Pointless resistance. He lunged, his hand shaped into a blade for a Shugen attack, aimed at Arashi's heart. This was his only chance. As Praetorian's hand entered his personal space, Arashi released the energy. It wasn't a blade of wind or a controlled gust. It was a raw, untamed, undirected explosion of pure life force. Ka boom. A shockwave of white gold energy erupted from his body. It wasn't an attack, it was a pure backlash. A system overload. The null field flickered and died. The circuits on Praetorian's gauntlets sparked and smoked, overloaded by the raw, unclassified energy. In the same instant, Luffy's body went sprawling, his rubbery nature snapping back into existence. Arashi collapsed to one knee, smoke rising from his body, his vision swimming. The move had taken almost everything out of him. He felt hollowed out, his life force drained to a dangerous low. Praetorian was sent flying back, his masked form slamming into the far wall. His gauntlets were ruined, sparking and melting. The null field was gone. But he was already getting back to his feet, pulling a short, wicked-looking blade from his belt. "Data collected," he said, his monotone voice now holding a hint of static. "Threat level confirmed." Proceeding with termination. But before he could take a step, a massive, rubbery fist slammed into his face. "Gomu Gomu no, pistol." Luffy roared, his arm snapping back to his body. The punch, imbued with all of Luffy's rage and frustration, connected with the full, satisfying force of his devil fruit. Praetorian's mask shattered, revealing a bland, unremarkable face underneath. His head snapped back, and his body was driven through the stone wall behind him. Disappearing into the darkness, Luffy stood panting, his fist smoking. He turned to Arashi, his face a mixture of worry and awe. "Arashi, are you okay?" "What was that?" "I'm fine," Arashi grunted, pushing himself to his feet. His body screamed in protest. He leaned on his cracked staff for support. "He was part of a group that's hunting me. We can't worry about that now." He looked towards the stairs. His senses, now fully restored, flared to life. He could feel it, a powerful, familiar, burning presence. 2 levels down. "Ace," he breathed. "He's on level 6. The way was clear. The riot, Magellan's impending arrival, the strange masked agent, it had all been a chaotic, brutal crucible. But they were through it. Together. "Come on, Luffy," Arashi said, clapping a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Let's go get our brother." Luffy grinned, his fighting spirit reignited. "Yeah, let's go." They plunged downwards, into the frozen hell of level 5 and towards the abyss of level 6. A united force of storm and rubber, their shared will a burning torch in the deepest, darkest pit of the world. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Summit of Kings. The air at Marineford tasted of salt, smoke, and blood. It was a cacophony of cannon fire, the clash of steel, and the roar of 100,000 voices locked in a struggle for the very soul of the era. On one side, the full MIGHT of the world government, 100,000 elite marines, the formidable 7 warlords, and the 3 admirals, monsters in human form. On the other, the Whitebeard pirates and their allied crews. A force of pirates who had come to save one of their own, led by the legendary Emperor, Edward Newgate. And in the middle of it all, falling from the sky like a thunderbolt from a clear blue heaven, was a stolen marine battleship. It crashed into the bay with a calamitous splash, sending a tidal wave crashing against the ice field created by Admiral Aokiji. The ship was filled with a motley, ragtag army of escapees from Impel Down, led by 2 brothers who had torn the great prison apart to get here. Arashi landed on the ice, his coat whipping in the wind, Luffy skidding to a halt beside him. Before them, the war stretched out like a hellish panorama. In the distance, on the execution platform, was Ace. He was kneeling, his head bowed, flanked by 2 executioners. His gaze was fixed on the battlefield, his expression a mixture of shame, disbelief, and overwhelming gratitude. And then he saw them. His 2 little brothers, standing at the heart of the maelstrom. "Luffy, Arashi," Ace's voice, raw and desperate, tore across the battlefield. "Why are you here?" I told you to live your own lives. Go back. Luffy ignored him, his eyes locked on the platform, his entire being singularly focused on one goal. Ace, we're here to save you. He bellowed, his voice filled with an unshakable conviction that defied the impossible odds. Arashi didn't shout, he met Ace's gaze across the blood-soaked ice. There was no condemnation in his eyes, no, I told you so. There was only a quiet, burning promise. I am here, I will not lose you. The message was as clear as if he had screamed it. A colossal figure near the front lines, Whitebeard himself, let out a deep, rumbling laugh. So, those are your brothers, Ace. Garararara. They've got some guts. The battlefield paused for a heartbeat. A collective intake of breath at the sheer audacity of the newcomers. Then the chaos resumed, redoubled. Kill them. Fleet Admiral Sengoku's voice boomed from the execution platform, amplified by a Den Mushi. Kill Monkey D, Luffy and the Anomaly, Maelstrom, Arashi. Do not let them get any closer. A wave of Marines surged forward. Luffy, straight ahead. Don't stop for anything, Arashi commanded, his voice cutting through the din. I'll handle the cannon fodder. Got it. Luffy shot forward, a rubber cannonball of pure determination. Arashi moved to intercept the Marines. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply raised a hand. The air in a 50-foot arc in front of him shimmered and compressed. He swept his hand to the side, and a solid wall of wind, a transparent, howling scythe, erupted from the ice. It wasn't a killing blow, it was a physical barrier of pure force. The entire front line of charging Marines slammed into it as if they'd hit a sheet of invisible steel, piling up in a groaning, tangled heap. The move bought Luffy precious seconds. It also drew the attention of bigger fish. Oh my, that's a troubling ability, a lazy, high-pitched voice drawled. A figure AP, paired in front of Arashi in a flash of brilliant yellow light. Admiral Kizaru, Borsalino, stood there, his hands in the pockets of his pinstripe suit, an expression of detached amusement on his face. To manipulate the air itself, that's not a logia. Very scary. Before Arashi could react, Kizaru's leg shot up, glowing with blinding light. Yasukani no Magatama, a hail of light-speed projectiles, laser beams of pure energy. Shot towards Arashi. There was no dodging it. The attack was too fast, too wide. So Arashi didn't try to dodge. He met light with storm. He spun his cracked but still functional ironwood staff. Not to block, but to create a vortex. He poured his will force into it, and the air around him twisted into a miniature tornado. The light beams entered the swirling air, and their trajectories were bent, refracted, and scattered. Most of the beams shot harmlessly into the sky or the ice around him. A few still grazed him, searing lines of heat across his coat and arms. But the attack that should have vaporized him was rendered almost ineffective. Kizaru's eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch. Ooh, you bent my light. How curious. Arashi didn't give him time to be curious. He thrust his staff forward, and a spear of compressed air shot at the admiral. Kizaru's body dissolved into shimmering particles of light, the air spear passing harmlessly through where he'd been. He reformed a few feet away, completely unscathed. A good try, Kizaru said, a finger glowing as he prepared another attack. But you are far too slow. This was a fight Arashi couldn't win. He knew it. Kizaru was a monster, a man made of light itself. To fight him was to punch a sunbeam. So, he wouldn't fight. He would manage. My fight isn't with you, Admiral, Arashi said, his eyes scanning the wider battlefield. His sage's eye was in overdrive. The battlefield was a chaotic tapestry of life forces. He could see the commanders of the Whitebeard pirates, brilliant flames like Marco the Phoenix and Diamond Jozu, clashing with the warlords and vice-admirals. He could see the ebb and flow of the marine forces, their tactical formations, their weaknesses. He was seeing the entire war from a god's eye perspective. Whitebeard's 3rd Division commander, Jozu. To your left, a pacifista is targeting Whitebeard's blind spot. Arashi roared, his voice amplified by a controlled gust of wind, carrying it across half the battlefield. Jozu, who was engaged with Aokiji, glanced over, his eyes widening as he saw the laser charging on the cyborg bear's mouth. He abandoned his attack on the admiral for a crucial second, throwing a chunk of ice that intercepted the beam. 5th Division commander, Vista. The Vice Admirals are trying to flank you from the west flank. They're aiming to cut you off from the main force. 10th Division Commander, Curiel. The cannons on Battleship 4 are reloading with shelling designed to melt the ice. Take them out now. His commands were sharp, precise, and unerringly accurate. He was a one-man command center, his strategic awareness turning the tide of small skirmishes all across the bay. The Whitebeard commanders, initially confused, CKLY realized his intel was perfect and began reacting to his calls, their chaotic charge gaining a new, terrifying layer of tactical cohesion. Sengoku, watching from the platform, slammed his fist on the railing. Where is that voice coming from? Silence him. Kizaru, what are you doing? Kizaru sighed dramatically. He is quite the handful. It seems I will have to get a little serious. He disappeared in a flash of light, reappearing directly behind Arashi. No more distractions, he said, his voice losing its lazy edge. His foot, glowing with the energy of a star, swung at the back of Arashi's neck. Arashi's senses screamed a warning. He couldn't dodge in time. But he didn't have to. A blur of blue flames intercepted the kick. A powerful talon, wreathed in the mythical fire of a phoenix, blocked Kizaru's attack with a resounding clang. Marco the Phoenix, 1st Division Commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, hovered in the air, one leg transformed. I don't know who you are, kid, but your intel is good, Yoi. I can't let the Admiral take out our new strategist. Thank you, Arashi said, not missing a beat. Now, if you can keep him busy for 30 seconds, I can stop half the cannon fire from the bay. Marco grinned. 30 seconds. I can give you a minute, Yoi. He launched himself at Kizaru, the two Logia and Mythical Zone users erupting into a battle of flame and light. Arashi didn't waste the opportunity. He knelt, placing both palms flat on the ice. He closed his eyes, focusing his will force not outwards, but downwards, into the massive sheet of ice in the bay beneath it. He could feel the dozens of marine battleships, their positions, their cannons. He took a deep breath and pushed. A massive, sustained updraft erupted from the surface of the water all around the marine fleet. It wasn't a violent attack. It was a wall of rising air, a powerful, unwavering current that created a zone of extreme, localized turbulence. The cannonballs, which were already in midair, were thrown off course, tumbling harmlessly into the sea. The ships themselves were tossed about, their cannons now unable to aim properly. The bombardment, which had been decimating the pirate forces, was effectively neutralized. The entire battlefield stared in awe. One man had just disarmed a naval fleet without firing a single shot. But the cost was immense. Arashi staggered to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. Maintaining that much control over such a vast area had pushed him to his limits. He looked up towards the platform. Luffy, with the help of the other pirates, was getting closer. But time was running out. Sengoku was giving the signal. The executioners were raising their blades. It's over, a deep, gravelly voice said behind him. Arashi spun around. The 3rd Admiral, Akainu, Sakazuki, stood there. His face was a mask of grim, absolute justice. Unlike Kizaru's lazy detachment or Aokiji's lazy justice, Akainu was a volcano of ideological zeal. Puffs of smoke and magma dripped from his body. You pirates are a cancer, Akainu growled, his arm transforming into molten rock. And you, with that troublesome power, you are a plague. You must be thoroughly eradicated. A fist of pure magma, hot enough to melt steel, shot towards Arashi. This wasn't light he could bend. This was overwhelming, absolute destructive power. There was a sudden roar, and a colossal figure slammed into the ice between them. Whitebeard himself, his naginata held high, intercepted Akainu. You will not touch my son's brother, Sakazuki. The Emperor bellowed, his voice shaking the very air. He looked down at Arashi. His eyes, though old, were sharp and clear. You have fought well, boy. You have saved many of my sons today. I will not forget this. Whitebeard turned his full attention to Akainu. And the two titans clashed, their battle shaking the island to its foundations. Arashi knew this was it. The final push. He forced his exhausted body to move, sprinting towards the plaza. Towards the shadow of the execution platform. Luffy had finally made it, thanks to a bridge of wax from Mr. 3 and the combined efforts of the remaining pirates. He was on the platform. He had the key. He jammed it into Ace's seastone cuffs. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed like it wouldn't work. But then, with a click, the cuffs sprang open. Ace was free. A roar of triumph went up from the pirate's side. Ace immediately exploded into a pillar of fire, his body reveling in its returned freedom. He and Luffy stood back to back, ready to fight their way out. Arashi finally reached the base of the platform, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked up and saw his two brothers, together, free. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees washed over him. They had done it. They had actually done it. Retreat. Whitebeard's voice boomed. Everyone, get to the ships. This is my final order as captain. The retreat was chaotic. The pirates turned, fighting their way back to the bay. Ace and Luffy were leading the charge, a whirlwind of fire and rubber. Arashi moved to join them, his body aching but his spirit soaring. Then, he felt it. A spike of cold, murderous intent. Akainu, his face smeared with blood from his fight with Whitebeard, emerged from the smoke. He was not looking at Luffy, or the retreating pirates. His eyes were locked on Ace, the son of Gold Roger. Turning his back and running away. Akainu sneered, his voice dripping with venom. Your father would be ashamed. And Whitebeard, a failure from a bygone era. A pathetic loser. Ace stopped. The fire around him sputtered. Arashi saw it happen as if in slow motion. The taunt, the hook, the bait. Ace's pride, his lifelong insecurity about his lineage and his fierce loyalty to Whitebeard, Akainu had targeted them both with surgical precision. Take that back, Ace growled, turning around. Ace. No, Arashi screamed, his voice raw with panic. He pushed his exhausted body, forcing it into a desperate sprint. Don't do it. Don't fall for it, please. Take back what you said about Whitebeard. Ace roared, his body erupting in flames as he charged Akainu. Dai Enkai. Entei. A massive fireball, like a miniature sun, shot towards the admiral. Akainu met it with his own attack. Dai Funka. A colossal fist of magma erupted, even larger than Ace's sun. It punched through the fireball, swallowing it whole. The elemental hierarchy was absolute. Magma burned even fire. The magma fist continued, unabated, not towards Ace, but towards Luffy, who stood frozen, exhausted from the battle. Ace's eyes widened in horror. He moved without thinking, his body a shield to protect his little brother. Arashi saw it coming. He saw the trajectory, the speed, the inevitable outcome. The world narrowed to that single, horrific point in time. The memory of a past failure, of a friend pierced by lightning, slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. No, not again. I will not be too late. He poured every last ounce of his remaining will force, every shred of his life energy, into one final, desperate act. He thrust his hands forward, creating a powerful vacuum, a vortex of swirling air Ned to suck Ace and Luffy out of the way. He was a fraction of a second too late. Akainu's magma fist pierced through Ace's back and erupted from his chest, stopping inches from Luffy's horrified face. Time stopped. The battlefield fell silent. The sounds of war, of shouting, of cannon fire, all faded into a dull, meaningless hum. The only thing that existed was the sight of Ace, a hole burned through his torso. His trademark grin replaced by a look of shocked agony. The vivre card in Luffy's hand, which had been whole moments before, began to burn away into ash. Ace collapsed into Luffy's arms. Arashi stood frozen, 20 feet away. His vortex dissipated into nothing. He had failed. Again. The same failure, a different life. The promise he had made to himself, the vow that had driven him for years. Shattered into a million pieces. A sound escaped his lips. It was not a word. It was a raw, primal noise of absolute, soul-shattering grief. It was the sound of a world breaking. And then, his control shattered. The dam of discipline and restraint that had governed his power his entire life burst. A hurricane of pure, untamed energy exploded from him. It wasn't wind. It was raw, golden-white will force. The unchained power of his very soul. The ice plaza cracked beneath his feet. The air itself screamed, warping and distorting around him. Friend and foe alike, marines and pirates, were sent flying. Blasted back by a shockwave of pure, grieving power. It was not an attack. It was a scream made manifest. In that moment of cataclysmic grief, a world away on her ship, watching the events unfold on a captured broadcast Den Mushi, Boa Hancock saw it. She saw past the warlord, past the strategist, past the powerful warrior. She saw the man, stripped bare, his heart breaking for all the world to see. And in that moment of absolute vulnerability, her intrigue, her fascination, her burgeoning respect, coalesced into a single, fierce, undeniable emotion. Love. It was terrifying and absolute. Back on the battlefield, Akainu, who had been momentarily staggered by the blast, recovered. He looked at the weeping, catatonic Luffy and the broken, kneeling Ace. Then he looked at Arashi. The source of the incredible power surge. 2 sons of D in one place. What a fortuitous day, he growled, his arm reforming into magma. I will erase this cursed bloodline from the world, starting with you. He lunged, his magma fist aimed at the emotionally shattered and completely defenseless Arashi. But something moved between them. A flash of elegant silk and deadly grace. Boa Hancock stood before Arashi, her back to him. Her arms spread wide as if to shield him. Her face, usually a mask of arrogance, was a portrait of cold, murderous fury. Her eyes, fixed on Akainu, blazed with the protective wrath of a cornered serpent. You will not touch him, she hissed, her voice lethally quiet. Her body glowed with the sheen of armament hockey. She was a warlord of the sea, and she had just chosen her side. Akainu skidded to a halt, his eyes widening in disbelief. Pirate Empress, what is the meaning of this? You are a warlord of the government. I am the Queen of Amazon Lily, she declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority. And I have made my choice. She had seen the depth of Arashi's soul in his grief. And she would sooner face the wrath of the entire world than let anyone harm the man who had, against all odds, captured the unshakable heart of the Serpent Empress. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Unraveling World. The escape was a blur of disconnected moments, a fever dream of chaos and desperation. Arashi remembered Hancock's perfume femur striking Akainu's magma fist, the hiss of steam as hockey-infused stone met molten rock. He remembered the sudden appearance of the red-haired pirates, Shank's calm, commanding presence bringing the war to a stunning, absolute halt. He remembered the frantic retreat to the bay, the desperate scramble onto a ship that wasn't theirs. And then, he remembered the deck of a submarine, the metallic tang of the air, and the face of the man they called the Surgeon of Death. Trafalgar Law, another of the so-called worst generation, had appeared in the bay's churning waters, his expression a grim mask of professional curiosity. I have my reasons, was all he'd said when asked why he was saving them. Arashi didn't care about his reasons. All he cared about was the still, broken form of his younger brother. Luffy was catatonic, his mind shattered by the trauma of Ace's death. He was curled in a fetal position, his body racked with silent, shuddering tremors. He was alive, but the light in his eyes was gone. Arashi sat beside him, a silent, hollowed-out guardian. The raw, untamed power he had unleashed at Marineford had receded, leaving behind an aching, cavernous emptiness. He felt drained, not just physically, but spiritually. The will force that was usually a raging river within him was now a stagnant pool. He had poured out his grief, and in its place, there was nothing. Only the cold, heavy stone of failure. He had relived his worst nightmare. He had stood on the precipice of victory, only to watch his brother die. Sacrificed for a moment of pride. The echoes of his past life were no longer ghosts, they were a chorus, mocking him. You failed Sasuke. You failed Ace. You fail everyone you try to save. The submarine surfaced within the protective embrace of the Kuja Islands, miles from Amazon Lily itself. Hancock's ship was waiting for them. Her gaze was frantic as she scanned the deck, her eyes finding Arashi immediately. The relief on her face was palpable, but it was quickly replaced by a sharp intake of breath as she saw the state of the two brothers. Bring them to the island, she commanded, her voice brokering no argument. They will recover at Kuja. Law, surprisingly, agreed. My medical knowledge can only stabilize his physical wounds. The psychological damage is beyond my expertise. He needs rest, a place where the Marines won't think to look. His gaze flickered to Arashi, a flicker of something unreadable, respect, perhaps, or just clinical interest, in his eyes. You too. The energy you released, it wasn't normal. It tore your insides apart on a cellular level. You're lucky to be alive. Arashi didn't respond. He just helped carry Luffy's unconscious form onto Hancock's ship, his movements stiff and mechanical. The air of Amazon Lily was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and healing herbs, but for Arashi, it smelled only of failure. They were given a secluded guest house, away from the main city. A quiet place of bamboo and flowing water. Luffy lay in a hammock, lost to the world, tended to by the Kuja's most skilled healers. Arashi did not rest. He couldn't. The moment he closed his eyes, he saw Akainu's fist, the hole in Ace's chest, the light fading from his brother's eyes. Sleep was not a refuge, it was a torture chamber. So he trained. He found a clearing deep in the jungle, a place where waterfalls cascaded into serene pools. And there, he pushed his body to the breaking point and beyond. He didn't practice his techniques. He didn't hone his control. He engaged in raw, brutal, physical punishment. He would lift boulders until his muscles tore, run until his lungs burned, and punch the unyielding rock faces of the cliffs until his knuckles were bloody and raw. He was trying to outrun the grief. He was trying to punish himself for his failure. Each searing pain was a penance, each drop of sweat an apology to the brother he couldn't save. His will force remained dormant, a quiet lake where a storm had once been. He couldn't summon the wind. He couldn't feel the world around him. He had closed himself off, a self-imposed exile from his own power. Hancock watched him from a distance. She saw the self-destructive spiral he was caught in. Her initial instinct, the one her life had taught her, was to command him to stop, to impose her will upon him for his own good. But she remembered the man in the arena, the man who spoke of a different kind of strength. She saw the pain that fueled his actions, a pain she understood all too well. She didn't try to coddle him. She didn't offer empty words of comfort. One evening, as he stood bruised and bleeding before a cracked rock face, she appeared in the clearing. She was not in her royal garb, but in simple training attire. She held two wooden practice swords. She tossed one to him. It clattered at his feet. "Fight me," she said, her voice even. Arashi didn't even look at her. "I have no interest. I am not asking," she stated, her tone hardening. She adopted a fighting stance. "You are a pathetic sight. Wallowing in self-pity. Is this the man who lectured me about true strength? Or was that just hollow words?" Her words were a deliberate sting, a calculated provocation. A flicker of anger, the first real emotion he had shown in days, sparked in his deadened eyes. He slowly bent down and picked up the wooden sword. "Fine," he growled. He came at her with a raw, brutish fury. It was the way Ace used to fight. All power, no finesse. He swung the sword with the intent to shatter bone. Hancock met his rage with a cold, elegant calm. She was a master of combat. She parried his clumsy, furious blows, her own sword a blur. She didn't mock him. She didn't lecture him. She just fought him. Her movements precise and controlled, a stark contrast to his wild abandon. She disarmed him in under a minute, the wooden sword flying from his grasp and landing in the dirt. He stood there, panting. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Again, she commanded. For hours they sparred. Each time, he attacked with rage, and each time, she defeated him with calm, disciplined skill. She was forcing him to confront his own state of mind, showing him that his raw, unfocused anger was useless. Slowly, grudgingly, his movements began to change. The rage began to recede, replaced by the ghost of his old form. He started to anticipate, to redirect, to think. Finally, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted, he collapsed to his knees. The fight was gone from him, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. Hancock stood over him, her own breathing only slightly labored. She knelt in front of him, her face level with his. "This will not bring him back," she said softly, her voice devoid of judgment. "Punishing yourself is an indulgence. It does not honor his memory. It dishonors it." A single tear traced a path through the grime on Arashi's cheek. Then another. The dam he had built inside himself finally broke. The grief, no longer a raging fire but a deep, crushing wave, washed over him. He hunched over, his body shaking with silent, racking sobs. Hancock did not touch him. She did not offer platitudes. She simply waited, a silent, unwavering presence in the encroaching darkness. She provided a safe harbor for his storm, allowing it to break without fear of being swept away. Later that night, they sat by a serene pool, the moon hanging like a silver disk in the black sky. The jungle was alive with the gentle chirping of insects. Arashi finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "It was my fault." "No," Hancock replied simply. "I saw it coming. The taunt, the trap. I knew what Akainu was doing. I knew Ace would fall for it," he said, his voice thick with self-loathing. "I tried to stop it. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't strong enough." He looked up at the moon, his eyes haunted. "This has happened before. In another life, almost. I had a brother. Not by blood, but a brother all the same. I made a promise to bring him back from a dark path. And in the end, I failed. I watched him fall, and I was powerless to stop it. I thought this time would be different. I thought if I was just strong enough, just smart enough, I could protect them. All of them." He didn't explain the reincarnation. He couldn't. But he laid the core of his trauma, the cyclical nature of his failure, bare before her. It was a confession of his deepest, most profound fear, that he was cursed to lose the people he loved. Hancock listened, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she reached out, her fingers gently touching the back of his hand. It was a hesitant, almost tentative gesture, but it was electric. "You carry a heavy burden, Arashi," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "A past that is not your own, and a future you feel solely responsible for. But you are wrong. Ace made his choice. He chose to defend his captain's honor. He chose to protect Luffy. His death was the consequence of his own decision. His own pride. It was a warrior's death, born of love and loyalty. To take that from him, to claim it as your failure, that is the ultimate arrogance." Her words were sharp, but they were true. They cut through the fog of his guilt, a painful but necessary surgery. He had been so consumed by his own role, his own perceived failure, that he had stripped Ace of his agency. "He is gone," she continued, her thumb gently stroking his skin. "You cannot change that, but you have another brother. One who is lost in the darkness right now. Wallowing in your own grief will not save him. Your strength, the strength you showed me in the arena, that is what he needs now." He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in days. He saw not the pirate empress, but the woman who had fought him, listened to him, and now offered him not pity, but a way forward. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of his own pain, a shared understanding of trauma that transcended words. In that moment, under the Amazon lily moon, a new, fragile connection was forged between them, a bond built not on grand gestures but on the quiet acceptance of shared scars. A few days later, a loud, familiar roar echoed from the guest house. "Meet." Arashi and Hancock arrived to find Luffy awake, stuffing his face with a mountain of food, tears and mucus streaming down his face as he ate. Standing beside him was a figure Arashi recognized from reputation alone. Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King, the first mate of the Pirate King Galdi. "Roger." Rayleigh explained his presence. He had come to find Luffy, to offer him a path forward. His proposal was simple. Instead of rushing back out into the new world, where he would surely be killed, Luffy would spend 2 years training, mastering the fundamentals of hockey. As Luffy wrestled with the decision, Arashi felt a flicker. A tiny spark in the stagnant pool of his will force. It was the first stirring of his power since Marineford. Hancock was right. His purpose wasn't in the past. It was here, now. With Luffy. He stepped forward. "He'll do it." Luffy looked at him, his mouth full of meat. Arashi walked over to his brother, who had finally stopped eating and was staring at his own hands, the memory of his powerlessness at Marineford a fresh, open wound. "I'm not strong enough," Luffy mumbled, his voice small. "I couldn't save anyone." Arashi placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, you weren't," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "None of us were. That's why we have to get stronger. Not just for ourselves, but for the family we still have. For the crew that's waiting for you." He looked Luffy in the eye. 2 years, Luffy. We train. We master our abilities. We become so strong that we never have to feel this pain again. And then, we'll turn the world upside down. For Ace." The fire returned to Luffy's eyes, a small ember at first, then a growing flame. He clenched his fists. 2 years, he said, his voice thick with a new resolve. I'll get stronger. I'll protect everyone. The decision was made. The message was sent to Luffy's scattered crew. A photo of the tattoo on his arm, 3D2Y, the 3D, crossed out. The meeting was not in 3 days, but in 2 years. While Luffy began his grueling hockey training with Rayleigh on the harsh, creature-filled island of Ruscana, Arashi began his own recovery. He meditated by the waterfalls, not punishing himself, but healing. He slowly, carefully, began to coax his will force back to life. He wasn't just rebuilding his strength, he was reforging his entire philosophy. His power was not just a tool to protect, it was a part of him. He could not deny it or close it off. He had to embrace it, understand it, and master it in a way he never had before. Hancock often joined him. They would talk for hours, sharing stories not of battles, but of their pasts. She spoke of her enslavement, of the horror of the celestial dragons, her voice quiet and laced with a lifetime of pain. He spoke of Dawn Island, of Garp, of the promise he and his brothers had made. They found solace in each other's company, a quiet understanding that blossomed into a deep, powerful affection. It was a love born not of fleeting passion, but of mutual respect and shared healing. Meanwhile, the world outside their secluded paradise was unraveling. The death of Whitebeard had shattered the balance of power in the new world. Wars for his territory were erupting everywhere. Blackbeard, now a Yonko, was on the move. The world government was consolidating its power, growing more brazen in its enforcement of absolute justice. In a sterile, white room deep within the holy land of Mary Geoise, a projection screen displayed the chaotic events of Marineford. The footage was grainy, taken from a marine surveillance den Mushi. Saint Icarus watched, his face impassive. He fast-forwarded through the battles, the posturing, the deaths. He was not interested in the war. He was interested in one specific moment. He paused the footage on a frame showing a maelstrom of white gold energy erupting from a single figure, blasting pirates and marines alike off their feet. The energy distorted the image, making it shimmer and warp. The 5 shadowy figures of the Gorosei, the highest authority in the world government, stood behind him. As you can see, Icarus said, his voice a silken, chilling whisper. The event at Marineford has confirmed my hypothesis. One of the Gorosei, a tall man with long white dreadlocks, spoke. This, Maelstrom Arashi, his power, it is not a devil fruit. We have confirmed this. Indeed, Icarus said, gesturing to the screen, this is not hockey. Hockey is the expression of human will. It can coat, it can intimidate, it can predict. It cannot, however, manifest as a raw, undirected explosion of pure energy that warps the very space around it. This is something else, something divine, or, more accurately, something that mimics divinity. He turned to face the 5 elders, his eyes burning with a cold, fanatical light. The legends of the Void Century speak of gods who walk the earth. The will of D is a persistent, cancerous echo of that time. A lineage of false deities who challenge the divine right of the celestial dragons. Monkey D. Luffy carries that will, but this one, Arashi, he carries its power. He pointed a slender finger at the screen. He is no longer a statistical anomaly. He is a primary threat. A heretic wielding a power that should not exist. He is a false god, and his very existence is an affront to the divine order we have maintained for 800 years. What do you propose, Icarus? Another elder, a bald man with a large mustache and a sword, asked. Icarus's lips curled into a thin, predatory smile. For centuries, the aegis of the heavens has operated in the shadows, pruning the weeds that threaten the celestial garden. It is time we moved into the light. The world has grown complacent. They have forgotten what true authority looks like. They have forgotten what it means to fear their gods. He straightened his pristine white coat. Grant me the authority to act. Grant me the full resources of the Aegis. I will not just capture this maelstrom. I will make an example of him. I will purge him, his family, and all who follow them. I will remind the world that there is only one true divinity, one absolute justice. The justice of the world nobles. The Gorosei were silent for a long moment. They were pragmatic men, rulers of the world. They knew the danger of instability. And the power they had just witnessed was the very definition of instability. The bald elder with the sword gave a slow, deliberate nod. The aegis of the heavens is yours to command. Erase this threat, by any means necessary. Icarus bowed, a gesture of perfect, chilling obedience. It will be done, my lords. The age of false gods is over. The war for the world had begun at Marineford. But the true war, the war against the heavens themselves, was just about to begin. And at its epicenter was a man on a secluded island, just beginning to heal, with no idea he had been declared the greatest enemy of the gods. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The God Slayer's Gambit. 2 years passed in a blur of relentless training and quiet healing. On the harsh island of Ruscana, Luffy, under Rayleigh's tutelage, battled monstrous beasts and mastered the 3 forms of Haki. His raw power, once a wild, untamed river, was being channeled, focused, and sharpened into a weapon of incredible potential. He was no longer just a brawler, he was becoming a true warrior. On Amazon Lily, Arashi's own transformation was less explosive but no less profound. He spent his days in meditation, not by a waterfall, but at the heart of a raging thunderstorm on a nearby, uninhabited island. He no longer commanded the wind, he became it. His will force surged back, stronger and more refined than ever. The raw, emotional outburst at Marineford had shattered his old limits, and in the aftermath, he had rebuilt his connection to his power from the ground up. His sage's eye could now not only sense life forces but could perceive the intricate web of intent and destiny that connected them. He could see the threads of a person's will, the path they were most likely to take. His relationship with Hancock had deepened into a partnership of 2 sovereigns. They were a study in contrasts, the calm, calculating storm and the fiery, imperious serpent, but their souls resonated on a fundamental frequency. They sparred together, their sessions a breathtaking dance of wind and stone. A clash of fluid grace and unyielding power. In the quiet evenings, they spoke of the world, of their shared desire to see the celestial dragons fall, and of the future. The love bet between them was not a thing of whispered sweet nothings, but of shared ambitions and a fierce, mutual respect. It was a bond forged in fire and tempered in understanding. The day of reunion arrived. The Straw Hat Pirates, scattered across the world, converged on the Sabayati archipelago, each one a transformed and far more powerful version of their former self. The reunion was a joyous, chaotic explosion of energy. Arashi and Hancock watched from the deck of the Kuja ship, anchored in a hidden cove. "He's ready," Hancock observed, watching Luffy laugh with his crew, a radiant son of pure joy and freedom. "He is," Arashi agreed, a proud smile on his face. "But the world isn't ready for him. He chose not to join Luffy's crew. His path was different. Luffy was destined to be the man at the center of the storm. The future pirate king who would draw all eyes. Arashi's role was to be the storm itself, the unseen force that would shape the currents and clear the path, dealing with the threats Luffy couldn't even see. He and Hancock would wage their own war in the shadows. Their first stop was Fishman Island, shadowing the Straw Hats. Arashi wanted to ensure Luffy's first steps into the new world were secure. The incident with Hody Jones and the new Fishman pirates was a minor squabble in the grand scheme of things, a mess Luffy handled with his newfound power. But it was there, in the depths of the sea, that Arashi felt the first cold tremor of their true enemy. While the Straw Hats celebrated, Arashi and Hancock met with Neptune and the royal family. In the palace's private chambers, Minister of the Right showed them a troubling discovery. A piece of sophisticated technology, a small, disc-like device recovered from the battlefield. It was made of an unknown alloy and bore no markings, save for a single stylized crest, a pair of balanced scales within a celestial circle. This device emitted a strange frequency during the battle, the minister explained. It seemed to agitate the sea kings in the area, drawing them towards the island. We believe it was designed to exacerbate the conflict, to push Hody Jones's rebellion into a full-scale cataclysm that would have destroyed Fishman Island entirely. Arashi picked up the device. It was cold to the touch, and his sage's eye could feel no energy from it. It was inert, but the crest, he had seen something like it before. In the filtered, electronic voice of a masked man in the depths of Impel Down. The aegis of the heavens. They weren't trying to help Hody, Arashi said, his voice grim. They were using him. They wanted to see what Luffy would do. They were testing him. He looked at Hancock, his eyes hard. And they were testing me. They wanted to see if I would intervene. The game had already begun. Saint Icarus wasn't just coming for him. He was using the world as his chessboard, and Luffy and his friends were pawns in his sight. The realization settled like a block of ice in his gut. He couldn't just follow Luffy. He had to get ahead of the threat. His intelligence network, a small but efficient web of contacts he had built over the years, confirmed his fears. There were whispers of a new, fanatical, marine unit operating outside the normal chain of command, led by a shadowy figure from Mary Geoise. They were called the God Slayers, and their mandate was absolute. His sources pointed him to the IR next likely area of operation, a small, independent kingdom in the New World called Arcadia. The island was known for two things: its unique, naturally occurring magnetic fields that made navigation to and from it treacherous, and its staunch neutrality. It had never aligned with the world government or any of the emperors. "Why Arcadia?" Hancock asked, as they studied the maps aboard the Tempest, which had rendezvoused with them after Fishman Island. "Because it's a symbol," Arashi replied, tracing the island's borders with his finger. "It's a place that has successfully remained free from the world's power struggles. If a place like this were to fall, to be brought to heel, it would send a message that no one is safe. No one is beyond the reach of the world government." He suspected Icarus wasn't going to launch a frontal assault. That wasn't his style. It would be something more insidious. A gambit. Their arrival at Arcadia was met with caution, but not hostility. Queen Lyra, a wise and pragmatic ruler, granted them an audience. She had heard the tales of Maelstrom, Arashi and the Pirate Empress, and she was wary. "We are a peaceful nation, Empress, Lord Arashi," she said, her voice firm but polite. "We have no quarrel with you, but we do not involve ourselves in the conflicts of the outside world. That is why we are here, Your Majesty," Arashi said, his tone respectful. "We believe your peace is about to be threatened. Not by pirates, but by the very institution that claims to uphold justice." He explained his theory: the whispers of the Aegis unit, the threat of a subtle infiltration. The Queen and her council were skeptical. They had maintained their independence for centuries through shrewd diplomacy and the natural defenses of their island. They were not easily frightened. "We appreciate your warning," the Queen said finally, "but we have faith in our own security. You are welcome to stay in our port for a few days to resupply, but we ask that you do not cause any trouble." It was a polite dismissal. Arashi had expected it. You can't convince someone a storm is coming until they feel the first drops of rain. The first drop fell 2 days later. It started with a tremor. A low, rumbling earthquake that shook the capital city. It was unusual, as Arcadia was not on a fault line. Then came another, stronger this time, toppling a few old statues in the town square. Panic began to set in. Over the next day, the tremors grew in frequency and intensity. Cracks appeared in the streets. Buildings began to crumble. The royal seismologists were baffled. The quakes had no epicenter. They seemed to be happening everywhere at once, a deep, resonant vibration that was shaking the island apart from its core. Arashi knew this was no natural disaster. He stood on the deck of the Tempest. His eyes closed, his sage's eye extended, not across the surface, but deep into the earth below. He could feel them. Dozens of them. Devices, like the one from Fishman Island but far larger. Buried deep within the island's crust. They were emitting a powerful, synchronized harmonic frequency, a resonance designed to shatter rock. It was technological warfare of the highest order. Suddenly, a massive earthquake, the strongest yet, ripped through the island. The main spire of the royal palace cracked and collapsed in a cloud of dust. Screams echoed from the city. And then, the accusers arrived. A squadron of marine ships appeared on the horizon, their approach perfectly timed with the disaster. They weren't a standard fleet. Their flags bore the crest of the scales within the circle. The Aegis. A man stood at the prow of the lead ship, his white and gold uniform pristine, his face handsome and radiating a calm, righteous authority. It was not Icarus himself, but one of his chosen lieutenants. His voice, amplified by a Den Mushi, boomed across the ruined port. "People of Arcadia, we are the Aegis of the heavens, a special task force of the world government. We have come to liberate you. For weeks, our intelligence has tracked the movements of the warlord Boa Hancock and the pirate, Maelstrom, Arashi to your shores. They have brought with them a terrible weapon. A device capable of shaking your world to its foundations. They are holding you hostage, destroying your home to force you into subjugation. Lay down your arms, and we will deliver you from these pirate tyrants. The gambit was brilliant, and devastatingly effective. The terrified, desperate citizens of Arcadia, seeing their homes crumble around them, looked from their ruined city to the pristine fleet of saviors. They looked at the Kuja warriors, powerful and intimidating, and at Arashi, a known pirate of immense power. The seeds of doubt, watered by fear, bloomed instantly into terrified certainty. The Arcadian royal guard, confused and panicked, turned their weapons on the Kuja pirates. You did this, their captain yelled at Hancock's commanders. Queen Lyra, her face pale with shock and betrayal, appeared on the battlements of her half-crumbled palace. Her gaze fell on Arashi, her eyes filled with cold fury. You came here to warn us of a threat, when you were the threat all along. Surrender now, or we will fight you to the last man. Arashi and Hancock were trapped. They were surrounded by a hostile kingdom, with a fleet of elite marine fanatics at their back. And an island that was literally shaking itself to pieces beneath their feet. They were faced with a terrible choice: flee and be branded as the monsters Icarus claimed they were, or fight. But how could they fight the very people they were trying to save? This is his plan, Hancock said, her voice a low growl as she stood beside Arashi on the deck, watching the unfolding chaos. To turn the world against you. To make you a villain in the eyes of the innocent. It's a smart plan, Arashi admitted, his gaze sweeping across the tactical nightmare before them. His mind was a whirlwind, processing 1,000 variables. The locations of the seismic devices. The strength of the Aegis fleet. The morale of the Arcadian guards. The collapsing infrastructure. He had two options. He could use his power to flatten the Arcadian forces and the Aegis fleet, saving himself and his crew but proving Icarus right. Or he could try to disarm the devices, a race against time while fending off attacks from all sides. A moral dilemma wrapped in a strategic crisis. He smiled. A cold, sharp, dangerous smile. Icarus thinks he's a god playing games with mortals. It's time to remind him what happens when mortals play back. He turned to Hancock, his eyes blazing with a fierce, brilliant light. I have a plan, but it's going to be insane. Hancock's lips curled into a matching, predatory smile. I would expect nothing less. The plan was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Hancock, Arashi began, his voice a rapid-fire series of commands. You and the Kuja will handle the front lines. I need you to engage the Royal Guard. Do not defeat them. Contain them. Use your haki, your beauty, your strength. Create a perimeter around the port. Show them your power, but do not shed a single drop of Arcadian blood. I need them to see that you are not the monsters they believe you to be. He then turned to his own small crew. Kale, get the Tempest out of the harbor. Take it to the southern cliffs. The magnetic fields are strongest there. Jin, you're with me. We're going underground. Hancock didn't question him. She trusted him completely. With a battle cry that was both beautiful and terrifying, she leapt from the ship onto the docks, her Kuja warriors fanning out behind her. They met the charging Royal Guard not with lethal force, but with a display of overwhelming, non-violent power. Kicks would land on shields, shattering them but stopping short of the person behind them. Arrows would pin soldiers to walls by their clothing. Hancock's haki washed over the weaker-willed guards, making them collapse. Unharmed but unconscious, she was a queen leading a dance of subjugation, a show of force designed to intimidate, not annihilate. Meanwhile, the Aegis commander watched from his ship, a smug smile on his face. Everything was proceeding as planned. The pirates were fighting the locals. It was the perfect justification. Advance the landing parties, he commanded. Engage and subdue the pirates. Show the people of Arcadia their saviors have arrived. As the Aegis Marines began to land, Arashi and Jin slipped away into the chaos of the ruined city. Arashi's sage's eye was their guide, leading them through collapsing buildings and fractured streets to a spot in the city's ancient aqueduct system. The first device is below us, Arashi said, pointing to a massive stone grate. 20 meters down. Jin, without a word, slammed his massive boot into the grate, shattering the stone. They dropped into the darkness below. This was Arashi's gambit. He couldn't fight a war on two fronts. So he would solve the problem that was turning everyone against him. He would stop the earthquakes. He and Jin raced through the ancient tunnels, Arashi guiding them with his senses. They found the device, a massive, humming metal cylinder embedded in the bedrock. Two Aegis engineers, clad in white, were monitoring it. They didn't even have time to react. A focused gust of wind from Arashi slammed them into a wall, knocking them out cold. Arashi placed his hands on the device. He couldn't just destroy it. The resulting energy discharge could trigger an even bigger quake. He had to disarm it. He focused his will force, not as a blunt instrument, but as a surgeon's scalpel, feeling the flow of energy within the machine, finding the power source, and carefully, precisely, severing the connection. The device powered down with a low hum. The tremors in their immediate vicinity lessened. One down, Arashi said, already turning. 12 to go. Above ground, Hancock was in her element. She was a force of nature. Her beauty as much a weapon as her haki. She petrified a handful of the more aggressive Aegis Marines who got too close, turning them into statues that served as a warning. She was a whirlwind of kicks and strikes, holding a line against both the misguided Arcadians and the fanatical Aegis soldiers, a one-woman army fighting to protect an army that was trying to kill her. The Aegis commander's smile began to fade. This wasn't going as planned. The pirates weren't slaughtering the locals. They were protecting them. And more confusingly, the tremors were subsiding. Deep below, Arashi and Jin were a whirlwind of efficiency. They moved from one device to the next, disabling them one by one. The quakes across the island grew weaker and weaker. Finally, they reached the last one, located in a vast cavern deep beneath the island's central mountain. But this time, someone was waiting for them. A figure sat calmly on the humming seismic device, a long, thin blade resting across his lap. He wore the same white and gold uniform as the others, but his was unadorned, almost sterile. It was Saint Icarus. He looked up as Arashi and Jin entered, a polite, almost pleasant smile on his aristocratic face. "Anomaly Maelstrom," he said, his voice the same silken whisper from the shadows of Mary Geoise. "I must confess, you are proving to be far more resourceful than the data suggested. I had calculated a 97% probability that you would engage in open warfare, proving my narrative correct. This is a far more interesting outcome." The air around Icarus was dead. It was the null field from Impel down, but far, far larger. It encompassed the entire cavern. Arashi felt his connection to the wind, his sage's eye, wither and die. He was blind. He was powerless. "You rely on your little trick, don't you?" Arashi said, his voice steady despite the sudden loss of his senses. He gripped his ironwood staff, its familiar weight a small comfort. "A trick," Icarus chuckled, a sound like glass breaking. "No, this is order. Your power is chaos, a flaw in the fabric of the world. My Gomu Gomu no Mi allows me to create zones of perfect, divine order, where the vulgar expressions of devil fruits and other such heresies are silenced. It is the power of a god correcting a mistake. And you, Arashi, are the greatest mistake of all." He stood up, his movements filled with an effortless, noble grace. "The world believes you are a monster. I will now make that truth manifest by killing you here, in the dark, where no one can see your power. All they will know is that you failed." He vanished. Asoru, executed with a speed and precision that made Praetorian look like a clumsy amateur. Jin moved to intercept, his axes a blur, but Icarus was too fast. He appeared behind the big man, and the hilt of his sword came down in a sharp, precise blow to the back of Jin's neck. Jin collapsed without a sound, unconscious. "Now, it is just you and I," Icarus said, his voice coming from all around Arashi in the disorienting darkness. "A god, and a man who pretends to be one." The battle began. It was a brutal, terrifying affair. Arashi was fighting deaf and blind, relying on nothing but his hearing, his instincts, and a lifetime of martial arts training. Icarus was a phantom, his soru making him a blur of motion, his other rokushiki techniques executed with flawless perfection. A tempest kick whistled past Arashi's ear. A shigen was parried at the last second, the force of it nearly shattering his staff. He was being toyed with, dissected. But Arashi was not just a man with powers. He was a warrior. He allowed a kick to connect with his shoulder, grunting at the searing pain, but he used the impact to pinpoint Icarus's location. He spun, his staff swinging in a low arc, forcing Icarus to leap back. He was learning, adapting. Even without his powers, he was a prodigy of combat. He started to use the environment, kicking up dust to momentarily cloud the air. Using the echoes of Icarus's movements to track him. He was surviving. He was fighting back. Icarus grew impatient, his cold amusement curdling into annoyance. "You are a remarkably persistent insect," he hissed. He appeared in front of Arashi, his sword a blur aimed at his heart. Arashi met the strike with his staff. The ironwood, already damaged from Marineford, finally gave way, shattering into a dozen pieces. Icarus's blade continued, slicing through Arashi's coat and cutting a deep gash across his chest. Arashi stumbled back, clutching his bleeding chest, his primary weapon gone. "It is over," Icarus said, preparing for the final blow. "Not yet," Arashi coughed, a bloody grin on his face. "You made one mistake. You brought me here." He stomped his foot, hard. Not an attack, a signal. Far above, on the southern cliffs of the island, Kale stood at the helm of the Tempest. He saw the signal, a pre-arranged flare Jin had launched before they went underground. "Now," Kale yelled. Ed to the Kuja engineers Hancock had lent him. They threw a massive lever. The Tempest wasn't just a fast ship, it was Arashi's creation. Its mast was a custom-built iron composite alloy, designed to act as a massive lightning rod. And its keel was lined with a network of conductive wires. It was a giant tuning fork. The Kuja engineers pumped energy into it, and the ship began to hum, broadcasting a powerful magnetic pulse into the island's already unstable fields. Deep below, Icarus lunged. And in that same instant, the final seismic device, the one he was standing next to, overloaded. Arashi hadn't been able to disarm it with his powers, so he'd used his knowledge of its mechanics, and the island's unique properties, to create a feedback loop. The device didn't just power down. It exploded. A wave of raw, kinetic, and magnetic energy erupted outwards. The null field, which required immense concentration from Icarus to maintain, flickered and died for a single, crucial second. It was all Arashi needed. His senses, his will force, his connection to the world flooded back in a glorious, overwhelming torrent. He could see Icarus, his eyes wide with shock from the explosion. Arashi didn't hesitate. He poured every ounce of his returned power into one hand. He didn't form a blade or a gust. He created a small, dense, spiraling sphere of pure, churning wind in his palm. It was a technique from a half-remembered dream. A lifetime ago. A Rasengan. "This is for Arcadia," he roared, and slammed the swirling sphere of power directly into Saint Icarus's chest. The impact was cataclysmic. The force of the spiraling wind didn't cut or burn. It tore, grinding Icarus's pristine uniform and the flesh beneath it into oblivion. The celestial dragon was blasted across the cavern, his body ipping off the rock walls like a stone on water before finally collapsing in a broken, unconscious heap. Arashi stood panting, his chest bleeding, his body screaming in agony. But he was standing. He had won. When he and a recovered Jin emerged from the tunnels, they found a transformed scene. The earthquakes had stopped, the sky was clear, and the people of Arcadia and their royal guard were standing shoulder to shoulder with the Kuja warriors, fighting off the last, disorganized remnants of the Aegis soldiers. Hancock, seeing what Arashi had done, had explained the truth to Queen Lyra. The evidence of the disabled devices, now being brought to the surface, was undeniable. The Aegis commander, seeing his godlike leader had failed, ordered a full retreat. Victory was theirs, but it was a sobering one. Arashi stood on the deck of his ship, his chest bandaged, watching the Kuja help the Arcadians begin to rebuild. He had won the battle. He had cleared his name. But Icarus was still alive, taken by his retreating forces. And now, the war was no longer in the shadows. It was in the open. He knew that Icarus, a man of profound arrogance and power, would not take this defeat lightly. This was not the end. It was the prelude. The god had been struck down. Now, the god would want blood. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Vow of the Storm. The sun rose over a healing Arcadia, its light glinting off the sea and the sweat-slicked brows of pirates and citizens working side by side. The sounds of battle had been replaced by the rhythmic clang of hammers and the shouts of masons directing repairs. The Kuja warriors, once feared as invaders, now shared water and rations with the royal guard, a tentative camaraderie forged in the crucible of a shared deception. The victory was real, but the atmosphere was heavy with the knowledge of how close the island had come to utter ruin. Arashi stood in the temporary royal court, a grand pavilion set up amidst the rubble of the palace. Queen Lyra, her regal bearing undiminished by the dust on her robes, bowed her head deeply. "Lord Arashi, Empress Hancock," she said, her voice resonating with a gratitude that was profound and humbling. "Words cannot express the debt my people owe you. We were deceived, blinded by fear. You had every right to abandon us to our fate, yet you fought for our truth, for our home. Arcadia is yours to command. We require no reward, Your Majesty." Arashi replied, his voice calm and steady. His chest was tightly bound, the gash from Icarus's blade a fiery line of pain beneath the bandages, but his stance was unwavering. "Your freedom is your own. We only ask that you remain vigilant. Our enemy is not one to forgive a slight." Hancock, standing beside him, added her own regal authority. "The world government will try to bury this. They will label you as pirate sympathizers. Be prepared for political fallout, if not direct retribution." Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, met the Queen's. "Strengthen your defenses. Forge alliances. In the coming era, neutrality will be a luxury no nation can afford." They left Arcadia not as conquerors, but as respected allies, their ships laden with supplies and the goodwill of a grateful kingdom. But as the island receded into the distance, a somber mood settled over the Tempest. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. They had merely survived a single move in a much larger, more terrifying game. That evening, Arashi convened a meeting in his private cabin. The small room was crowded. His loyal crew, Jin, Kale, and the others, stood along one wall. Hancock sat opposite him at the small table, her expression serious, and leaning against the far wall, a surprise visitor who had arrived in the battle's aftermath, was a tall, blond man with a pineapple shap-ed haircut and a weary but resilient look in his eyes. Marco the Phoenix, former 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. He had sought out Arashi after hearing whispers of the incident at Arcadia. Whispers that spoke of a pirate who fought the world government's secret hounds, not for territory or treasure, but for the sake of an innocent kingdom. "The remnants of Pop's crew are scattered, Yoi," Marco said. His voice tinged with a familiar sadness. "We lost the payback war against Blackbeard. We're leaderless, directionless. Many have retired. Others have been hunted down. I've been protecting Sphinx, Whitebeard's home village. But your fight, it feels like a continuation of the old man's will." "Whitebeard wanted a family," Arashi stated, his gaze steady. "He wanted a place for his sons to belong. Icarus and the world nobles want a world where everyone belongs to them. In that sense, our goals are diametrically opposed." He unrolled a map of the new world, its surface hour 80 marked with his own strategic notations. "Icarus won't make the same mistake twice. He underestimated me. He underestimated the bonds of trust. Next time, he will come with overwhelming force, or a deception so complete that no one will believe the truth." "So, what is the plan?" Jin asked, his voice a low rumble. "We can't just keep reacting to his moves. He'll eventually corner us." "No," Arashi agreed, his eyes scanning the map. "We stop reacting. We start acting. We can't defeat the Aegis of the heavens by ourselves. Their resources, their political power, it's too vast. Icarus's null field is a tactical nightmare. Anyone who relies on a devil fruit is a liability in a direct confrontation with him." Hancock's hand tightened into a fist at that. The memory of her powerlessness in the cavern was a fresh wound. "So we need two things," Arashi continued, his voice taking on the crisp, decisive tone of a general planning a campaign. "Allies, and a way to counter his power. Marco, you can help with the first. The Whitebeard pirates may be scattered, but their loyalty to their captain was legendary. They need a new purpose. Not a new captain to replace Whitebeard, but a new war to fight in his name. A war against the gods, who orchestrated his death." Marco's eyes lit up with a renewed fire. It was a purpose, a way to honor the legacy of the man who had been a father to him. "I can find them, Yoi. I can bring them to the cause." Good, Arashi nodded. Hancock, your Kuja are formidable warriors, and Amazon Lily is a fortress. But Icarus knows you are with me. He will see your island as a target. We need to turn it from a fortress into a global symbol of defiance against the celestial dragons. And the second part? Hancock asked, her focus sharp. How do we counter a power that erases power? Arashi looked at the map, his gaze distant. Icarus's power is absolute, but it has weaknesses. It requires concentration. It has a limited, though large, range. And it can be overloaded, as we discovered. But most importantly, it only works on paracausal abilities. It doesn't stop a sword. It doesn't stop a cannonball. And it doesn't stop technology. He tapped a location in the North Blue. Germa 66. The Vinsmoke Kingdom. They are masters of genetic engineering and advanced military technology. Their raid suits grant superhuman abilities without the use of devil fruits or hockey. They are amoral mercenaries, but their science could be the key. If we can acquire or replicate their technology, we can field an army that is immune to Icarus's greatest weapon. It was an audacious, almost impossible plan. To unite the remnants of a Yonko's crew, turn a secluded island into a revolutionary symbol, and steal the military secrets of the infamous Germa Kingdom. This is no longer a pirate cruise adventure, Arashi said, his gaze sweeping over everyone in the room. This is the beginning of a revolution. A war fought in the shadows against the self-proclaimed gods of this world. It will be long, and it will be bloody. I will not order any of you to follow me down this path. Jin stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. We've been with you from the start, Captain. We're not stopping now. Kale and the others murmured their assent. Marco just grinned. Sounds a hell of a lot better than retirement, yoi. Hancock said nothing. She just reached across the table and placed her hand over Arashi's. It was a simple, solid gesture of unwavering support. The decision was unanimous. The meeting concluded, the cabin emptying until only Arashi and Hancock remained. The weight of their new path settled in the quiet space between them. Arashi walked over to a porthole, staring out at the dark, churning sea. I'm dragging you into a war that isn't yours, he said, his voice quiet. Your people, your home, they will be in danger because of me. Hancock came to stand beside him, her reflection a pale, beautiful ghost in the glass. You seem to forget, Arashi, she said, her tone soft but laced with steel. My war with the celestial dragons began the day they put a brand on my back. I have been fighting it alone my entire life. The only difference is, now, I am not alone. She turned him to face her, her hands resting on his bandaged chest, her touch surprisingly gentle. When you fought me in that arena, you saw past the Empress. You saw the slave girl. But when I look at you, I don't see the maelstrom, or the strategist, or the brother of the future pirate king. I see the man who would tear down the heavens for the sake of one person's freedom. How could I not follow a man like that? The air between them was charged, heavy with unspoken emotions, with the culmination of 2 years of shared healing, respect, and a love that had grown silently and surely in the heart of the storm. Arashi looked into her eyes, those deep, beautiful eyes that had once held only arrogance and fear, but now held a fierce, unwavering loyalty. He saw his partner, his equal, his home. He didn't offer her a ring. He didn't make a grand, flowery declaration. That wasn't their way. Their love was not a gentle flame. It was a roaring forge, a thing of strength and purpose. He raised a hand, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. His voice was quiet, but it held the force of a tidal wave, the conviction of a coming storm. I'm going to tear down the gods who put those brands on your back. He vowed, his blue eyes blazing with an intensity that seemed to light up the dim cabin. I will shatter their thrones, burn their holy land to the ground, and build a world where no one, ever again, has to feel the fear that you felt. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Will you face that storm with me? Hancock's response was not a girlish blush or a whispered, yes. Her eyes blazed with the fire of a warrior queen who had found her king, her cause, and her purpose all in one. She rose on her toes and her lips met his. The kiss was not gentle. It was a clash of wills. A sealing of vows, a promise of fire and storm and revolution. It was the taste of salt and ozone, of shared pain and a united, unbreakable purpose. It was the quiet beginning of a war that would reshape the world. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, the air crackling with the energy of their shared resolve. A moment later, Jin knocked and entered the cabin, holding up a piece of paper. "Captain, the new bounties are out." He handed the poster to Arashi. On it was a familiar, grinning face under the name, Monkey D. Luffy. The bounty was a staggering 500 million berries. Arashi looked at the poster, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. Hancock leaned against his shoulder, looking at the image of the reckless, free-spirited boy W.H.O. was about to take the new world by storm. "He's on his way," she murmured. "Yes, he is," Arashi agreed. He handed the poster back to Jin. "Let him have the spotlight. Let him race towards his dream. It will draw the world's attention. It will draw Icarus's focus." He wrapped an arm around Hancock's waist, holding her close as they looked out at the dark horizon. "Luffy will become the Pirate King. That is his destiny. But our destiny," he trailed off, his gaze hardening with cold, absolute purpose. "Our destiny is to clear the board of kings, emperors, and gods, so that when he gets there, he can build a new world on its ashes." It was a vow of two sovereigns, a warrior queen and the storm she had chosen to embrace. The path was clear. The alliances were being forged. The war in the shadows had begun. While the world watched the Straw Hat, they would hunt the gods. The maelstrom was coming for the heavens. Chapter 7 End.